The wind whistles through the tall pines, carrying the smell of rain and earth, as if the very breath of the earth is alive. It speaks to you, low and steady, like an old friend whispering secrets. The sky above is vast, a canvas painted in the rich hues of the setting sun, but there's something more than beauty in this moment. There's a presence. You can almost feel it, like the air itself is charged with the weight of ancient stories and memories. The trees, the mountains, the animals, they're not just things around you, they are alive, they are sacred, and they carry spirits. For the Native American peoples, the world has always been alive with spirit. From the smallest pebble to the towering eagle, everything holds energy, meaning, and purpose. These spirits, ancient and wise, are not distant, unreachable beings. They are here, always, in the wind, in the trees, in the flowing rivers and the silent, watchful mountains. They are the heartbeat of the land, and the land itself is sacred, a living entity that must be respected, cared for, and revered. In Native American cosmology, the connection between humans and nature is unbreakable. The animals are not merely creatures to be hunted or observed, they are teachers and guides. The wind is not just a breeze to cool the skin, it carries messages from the past, whispers from the ancestors, warnings, and blessings. The spirits are everywhere, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized by those who listen. And in every rock, every tree, every animal, there is a story to be told. Each tribe has its own unique way of understanding these spirits, but at the heart of it all lies a shared belief that the earth, the sky, and all beings within them are interconnected. The sun, the moon, the stars, they are more than celestial bodies. They are powerful, divine beings whose movements in the sky govern the rhythms of life on earth. The moon's gentle light is a guide, the sun's warmth a protector. The stars twinkle not just to illuminate the night, but to remind us that the spirits of our ancestors are always watching, always near. But it's not just the sky that holds spirits. The animals too, whether they roam the forests, glide through the skies, or swim in the rivers, are seen as sacred. The wolf is a guide, leading lost souls through the darkest nights. The eagle is a messenger between humans and the Creator, soaring high to bring wisdom and strength. The bear, strong and fierce, teaches balance, how to protect oneself, but also how to find peace. Each animal, each creature, has its own spirit, its own lesson to offer. To live in harmony with them is to understand their teachings, to honor them, and to carry their wisdom with you. But what makes these spirits so powerful? It's not just their strength or their beauty, it's their ability to shape the world around us. In Native American belief, everything in nature has a spirit. The mountains rise not just as geological formations, but as ancient beings that hold the stories of the earth. The rivers aren't mere bodies of water, they are flowing lifeblood, and their currents carry the memories of those who have lived and passed. Even the wind has a voice, a personality, capable of causing destruction or whispering comfort. There's a constant dialogue between humans and spirits in this worldview, one that doesn't stop. The spirits speak through dreams, through visions, and through the land itself. A whisper in the trees might be a warning, a feeling in the bones might be a message. Everything, from the smallest insect to the tallest tree, has a role to play in the balance of life. There are no accidents, no coincidences. Each event, each encounter, each experience is a thread in the tapestry of the world, woven together by the spirits themselves. It is this connection, this deep bond with the earth and its beings, that guides the Native American peoples in their daily lives. Whether through ritual or prayer, through dance or song, the spirits are always present. They are honored in ceremonies, where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual world blur. The drumbeat echoes the heartbeat of the earth itself, calling the spirits to join in the dance, to bless the people, to guide them. The fire, crackling and bright, is not just for warmth, it is an offering to the spirits, a way to communicate with the unseen forces that govern the world. Every ritual, every ceremony, is a reaffirmation of that bond, a way to acknowledge that we are not separate from nature, but part of it, and that the spirits walk with us every step of the way. And it's not just the land and the animals that carry spirits. The very fabric of time is woven with spirit. The seasons change not just because of the tilt of the earth, they change because the spirits of winter, spring, summer, and fall are moving through the world, each bringing their own gifts, each with their own lessons. When the leaves fall from the trees in autumn, it's not just a natural process, it's the spirit of the season, teaching us about letting go, about renewal, about the cycles of life and death. In the quiet moments, when the world slows down, you can almost hear it, the voice of the earth, the spirits of the land, calling out. They are always there, in the rustling of the leaves, in the howl of the wolf, in the flight of the eagle. They are not distant gods, far removed from the everyday struggles of life. They are here, in the dirt beneath our feet, in the sky above our heads, in the very air we breathe. They are part of us, and we are part of them. In Native American cosmology, the earth is not just a place we live, it is our home, our protector, our teacher. And the spirits that live within it guide us, challenge us, and remind us of the sacredness of all life. It is a world where the invisible becomes visible, where the past and present are intertwined, and where every being, every force, and every element has a purpose. The spirits are not just stories to be told around a fire, they are the foundation of existence itself, the pulse that keeps the world turning. To understand the world is to understand the spirits that shape it, to listen to their whispers, and to honor the deep, eternal bond that exists between humans and nature. Before there was light, before the stars blinked awake and stretched their glow across the sky, there was darkness. But it was not empty. The silence held a heartbeat, slow, ancient, and patient. Out of that heartbeat, something stirred, something vast and full of purpose. The earth was not born suddenly. It rose gently, like a song hummed by unseen voices, a soft vibration carried on the breath of beings older than time. In the stories passed down by firelight, the first spirit beings did not simply appear, they were sung, whispered, and dreamed into existence by forces that existed long before the first human footsteps graced the land. Some say the earth was shaped by a great being who knelt and scooped mountains from the soil with his hands, carving valleys with his fingers and pouring rivers with the tilt of his head. Others say the world lay flat and still until the thunderbird cracked the sky with his wings, calling forth rain to shape the forests and lakes. His feathers dripped with water, giving birth to the rivers that still run today. Among the Lakota, there is a story that the first spirit came from the stars, descending on beams of light, her face hidden by the clouds that wrapped around her like a veil. She knelt in the soft earth and breathed life into it, creating grasses, flowers, and trees with every exhale. Where her tears fell, lakes formed, cradled by the land. Her sorrow was not of sadness but of longing, for she was alone in this new world. Her tears called to other spirits, pulling them down from the sky one by one until the land trembled under their footsteps. The Cherokee speak of the water beetle, small and unassuming, but full of curiosity. When the world was only water, it was the beetle who dove beneath the surface, searching for something more. From the depths, he brought up mud in his tiny legs, which he spread across the water's surface. The mud grew, stretching outward until it became the land. Watching him, the great buzzard flew low over the wet earth, his wings heavy. As he flew, his wingtips scraped the ground, lifting mountains with each stroke, carving valleys where his shadow passed. But not all spirits came from light and warmth. Some crawled from the shadows beneath the earth, born from the quiet hum of the underworld. The Hopi tell of the time before this world, when the people lived underground in the first world, sheltered by the spider grandmother. It was she who led them upward, climbing through layers of stone until they emerged into this world. But with them came spirits of the old world, some kind, some mischievous, and others filled with hunger. They linger still, hidden in caves and canyons, watching the living with eyes that gleam like fire. In the Pacific Northwest, the first spirits did not walk on two legs. They swam in the cold waters of the ocean, watching the land from afar. Raven, curious and clever, grew tired of the sea. He rose on black wings, landing on the shore, where he shaped the land with his beak, dropping pebbles to form islands and using his feathers to brush away the mist that covered the sky. One day, he found a giant clamshell resting on the sand. As he peered inside, small figures huddled within, tiny, trembling humans. Raven laughed and pried the shell open, releasing them into the world. There is something haunting in these stories, something that lingers long after the words are spoken. They remind us that spirit beings were never distant. They were the first to walk this land, long before human eyes ever saw it. They shaped the mountains, whispered life into the forests, and stirred the oceans. Even now, their hands are in the roots of ancient trees, their breath in the wind that sweeps across the plains. The Navajo speak of the holy people who danced the world into being beneath a sky crowded with stars. With each step, they shaped the land, their footprints becoming sacred places where people still gather today. But the holy people were not the only ones present in that dance. Coyote watched from the edge of the circle, his eyes gleaming with mischief. When the holy people were not looking, Coyote slipped into their work, scattering stars across the sky with careless flicks of his tail. He placed them in patterns that made little sense, laughing as he filled the sky with chaos. His mischief gave the night its beauty, random, wild, and full of wonder. For the Inuit, spirit beings emerged from the ice and snow, born from the breath of the wind. Sedna, the sea goddess, sank beneath the waves, her fingers severed by betrayal. From each finger, seals, whales, and fish sprang to life, filling the ocean with creatures. She remains there still, beneath the cold water, her hair tangled with seaweed, her eyes wide and watchful. When storms rise suddenly at sea, the people say it is Sedna, angered or grieving, calling her creatures back to her. The origins of these spirit beings are not distant myths, they pulse in the heartbeat of the land, stitched into the world itself. Their stories are not bound to the past, they live on in the howl of wolves beneath the full moon, in the rustle of leaves as unseen feet pass through the forest, and in the sudden, sharp gusts of wind that vanish as quickly as they come. It is said that even now, the first spirits still roam the earth. Some were the faces of animals, some the shape of the wind, and others walk as shadows beneath the trees. They are not gone, not forgotten. They are etched into the stones, carved into the bark of ancient trees, and whispered in the cries of eagles soaring overhead. Every step on this land is a step on sacred ground, where spirit beings once stood, and where they may still stand, just beyond the reach of human sight. In the quiet of the forest, something watches. The air feels thicker, heavier, as if unseen eyes are pressing down from the branches above. You stop, sensing it, just a flicker at the edge of your vision, gone before you can turn your head. It wasn't the wind. The forest holds its breath, waiting. Some say it's a guardian spirit, standing between the living and the unknown. Others whisper that it could be something else, something playful or dangerous. There are beings older than words, spirits that carry the weight of mountains in their gaze and the hum of the stars in their breath. Some protect, standing silent and tall like the ancient pines that stretch their arms toward the sky. They are the guardians, the ones who watch over sacred lands, guiding those who respect them and warning those who forget to tread lightly. Then, there are the tricksters, wild, restless beings who shift like shadows, never staying long in one shape. Their laughter echoes through the canyons and along the rivers, sharp as the cry of a coyote beneath the moon. They are not evil, but they are not kind either. They teach by making fools of the proud, exposing the cracks in those who believe they know everything. Coyote is the one most often blamed when food goes missing from the fire or when the trail leads in circles, but sometimes his pranks save lives. Shapeshifters walk quietly between the worlds of man and beast. Their eyes glow in the night, and when the wind stirs, you might catch the glimpse of a wolf or deer that doesn't move like the others. Some say these spirits can slip into human skin, blending with the crowd, their secrets hidden beneath calm smiles. There are stories of them leading hunters away from danger or standing watch outside a campfire, only for the shape to vanish by morning. But there are darker stories too, ones whispered only when the fire burns low, of beings that wear human faces by day and slip into animal form by night, moving unseen beneath the stars. High above, beyond the reach of even the tallest mountains, celestial spirits dance across the sky. Their light flickers in the northern lights, shimmering as if the ancestors themselves have gathered to speak to the living. The stars are not just distant suns, but the eyes of spirits who have passed into the sky, guiding those below. Some believe the brightest star is the path home, while others see constellations as the shapes of the first beings, frozen forever in the heavens. The guardians rarely show themselves, but their presence is felt. When a lost traveler stumbles back onto the path after wandering for hours, it is said a guardian spirit gently nudged them in the right direction. The tall, still figure glimpsed between the trees at dusk, the one that seems to vanish when you try to follow, belongs to them. They do not ask for thanks or recognition. Their duty is to protect the land, not the people, though sometimes the two cannot be separated. But for every guardian, there is a trickster lurking nearby, grinning in the shadows. They are the wind that knocks over your belongings or the sudden rain that drenches your fire. Coyote is the most famous, but Raven carries the same wild energy, stealing light from the sun to bring it to the people, only to drop bits of it along the way. His black feathers, some say, are scorched from carrying the burning sun too close to his heart. His stories are told with both laughter and warning, for tricksters often tread the line between hero and fool. The shapeshifters are harder to speak of, their stories wrapped in caution. They are the spirits who choose to walk between worlds, wearing fur by night and skin by day. They are not easily understood, and that unsettles people. A stranger arriving at the village with eyes that shine too bright or a wolf that lingers too long outside the firelight, these are signs of a shapeshifter passing through. They do not seek to harm, but their presence reminds everyone that the boundaries between the human and spirit worlds are thinner than most would like to believe. Celestial spirits, though distant, are no less present. The sun itself is seen as a living being, its warmth not just heat but the breath of a spirit who watches over the earth. The moon, soft and cool, guards the night. In some stories, she is a sister to the sun, endlessly chasing him across the sky. When eclipses come, it is said the two finally meet, casting shadows across the land as they embrace. Shooting stars are the footsteps of spirits racing across the heavens, and comets are messages sent to remind the people below that they are not alone. Even now, these spirits linger. Some are woven into the land itself, the rustle of leaves that sound too much like whispers, the sudden call of an owl when no one else is around. They wait at the edge of vision, just beyond reach, but their presence is unmistakable. Whether they stand in the sky, in the forests, or hidden beneath the surface of rivers, they are part of this world, shaping it with hands unseen. And when the wind carries laughter that doesn't belong to anyone, or when the stars seem to shift while you aren't looking, it's easy to wonder, was it a guardian watching, a trickster playing, or a shapeshifter passing by, wearing the night like a cloak? The answer lies in the quiet moments, in the stillness between heartbeats, where the spirit beings wait, patient as the earth beneath your feet. The fire crackles softly, sending flickers of orange light dancing across the faces of those gathered. An elder's voice rises, steady as the wind that moves through the tall grass. He speaks not to entertain, but because the spirits are listening. Every word carries weight, every story feeds the roots of something much older than anyone sitting around the fire. Out there, just beyond the circle of light, the spirits wait, silent but present, listening with the patience of stone. Long before the sun breaks the horizon, prayers are already rising with the smoke from the morning fire. The people speak to the spirits as if they are standing close by, because they are. There are spirits in the fields, woven into the stalks of corn and the roots of the squash. The soil is not just dirt, it is living, breathing, watched over by unseen hands. Before planting, the seeds are blessed, held gently in cupped palms, as if cradling something fragile. The spirits must be asked to nourish the earth, to send rain when the sky feels dry, and to keep the frost away when the nights grow cold. The first hunt of the season carries a weight that cannot be spoken aloud. As the hunters walk into the forest, their footsteps are soft, careful not to break more twigs than necessary. The animals are not just animals, they are spirits wrapped in fur and feathers. A deer does not simply fall to the arrow, it offers itself, and that offering must be met with respect. Before the arrow flies, a quiet request is made. The hunter's heart beats in time with the forest. If the spirit of the deer senses disrespect, the hunt will fail. Tracks will vanish, the forest will thicken, and the animals will blend into the shadows. When the deer is taken, a gift is left behind, tobacco scattered across the ground, a whispered thank you drifting into the trees. The bones are treated carefully, the hide stretched with gentle hands, because the spirit of the deer watches long after its body is gone. If honored properly, the spirit will return, guiding more deer to the hunters when food is needed again. But if forgotten or mistreated, the forest will grow quiet, and hunger will settle over the people like a cold wind. Healing does not happen with herbs alone. When sickness settles into a home, the healer listens, not just to the heartbeat of the sick, but to the whispers that hang in the air around them. Illness is often more than a physical ailment. It is a disturbance in the delicate balance between the living and the spirits. Sometimes, it is a forgotten offering, a neglected prayer, or a spirit that feels ignored. The healer hums low songs, songs that drift through the air like threads, weaving the living and the spirits back together. The wind carries these songs into the woods, over the rivers, and into the hills, calling on spirits to lend their strength. A single feather, a handful of ash, or the curl of smoke rising from burning sage may be enough to shift the balance. Healing is not demanded, it is asked for. Spirits must agree to let go of the sickness, to lift it gently from the body and carry it away. The healer's hands may brush over the skin of the sick, but it is the spirits that do the real work, moving like shadows just out of sight. The rhythm of daily life beats in time with the spirits. When a child takes their first steps, a quiet blessing is whispered to the wind, asking the spirits to guide their feet along safe paths. When the harvest is gathered, offerings are left in the fields, small tokens of gratitude to the spirits who watched over the crops. Even the rivers are spoken to, their waters scooped up and held in trembling hands, as if lifting the sky itself. A single drop falls back into the current, carrying prayers downstream to where other spirits wait beneath the surface. Not all spirits are gentle. Some linger on the edges of things, at the border of the forest, or in the hollow of an old tree. They are not malicious, but they are easily angered by disrespect. To enter their space without permission is to invite trouble. Hunters know to leave small gifts at these borders, bits of food, polished stones, anything that might please the spirit watching from the shadows. Those who forget may find themselves walking in circles, no matter how well they know the land. At night, the stars overhead are not silent. They watch with quiet eyes, and it is said that some spirits rest among them, looking down with interest at the fires burning below. When someone speaks aloud to those who have passed, the stars seem to flicker in response, as if the spirits are leaning closer to listen. Every part of life moves in step with the spirits. The boundaries between this world and theirs are thin, as fragile as the surface of a still lake. To honor the spirits is to keep that lake undisturbed, the reflection of the stars above clear and bright. One ripple, one forgotten offering, one broken promise, and the surface shatters, the spirits slipping away into the dark. But when the balance is kept, when the spirits feel seen and remembered, the land hums with life. The crops grow tall, the animals return, and the sickness fades like mist beneath the rising sun. There are moments when the spirits step closer, so close their presence can almost be felt, like a warm breath against the back of the neck or the brush of a hand that vanishes when you turn to look. The people speak to them not out of fear, but out of respect, knowing that the world is shaped not just by human hands, but by those unseen. Every harvest, every hunt, every life begins and ends with the spirits. Their touch is soft as the wind and as powerful as the rising storm. The drumbeat carries across the valley, low and steady like the pulse of the earth itself. On another hill, far from the firelight, a different song rises, softer but no less powerful. The voices do not clash. They drift together on the wind, weaving through the trees and settling over the land like a blanket. Each voice belongs to a different people, but the spirits listening do not care about the names spoken by men. They listen to the rhythm beneath the words, to the shared reverence that echoes in every corner of this land. The stories of the Lakota stretch wide, their spirits riding the backs of thunderclouds, galloping across the sky with hooves made of lightning. In the south, the Hopi speak of Kachinas, spirits that wear masks of corn and rain, stepping between this world and the next as easily as passing through a curtain. Along the coast, the Tlingit tell of Raven, the shapeshifter who plucked the sun from the grasp of darkness and tossed it into the sky. The lands may change, the names of the spirits shifting like sand, but the hum that binds them is the same. Across the plains, the buffalo is more than an animal. It is life wrapped in flesh and horn, its spirit bound to the people like family. The Sioux speak of white buffalo calf woman who brought the sacred pipe, her arrival etched into the bones of the land. Her breath still lingers in the smoke that curls from every pipe lifted toward the sky. In the northeast, the Iroquois speak of the great turtle, whose shell carries the weight of the world itself. The ground beneath their feet is not simply earth, but the back of an ancient spirit, steady and strong. In the deserts, the Navajo sing to the wind, calling on the holy people to guide their steps. The sand shifts beneath their feet, but they walk without fear, knowing the spirits are near, shaping the land with gentle hands. To the west, the Haida carve the faces of spirits into cedar, their totems standing tall against the misty shores, watching with eyes that never close. Though separated by mountains, rivers, and vast open plains, the people share more than they know. The land whispers to them all, and the spirits speak in languages older than time. The symbols etched into the skin of one tribe may not match those painted on the drums of another, but the meaning lingers beneath the surface. Life is held together by threads unseen, threads spun by the hands of spirits that move like shadows through the forest and over the hills. The trickster appears again and again, his name changing but his laughter the same. Among the plains tribes, Coyote trots through the tall grass, his tail flicking mischief into the air. Farther north, Raven's wings cut across the sky, his sharp eyes glinting with secrets. These tricksters do not belong to any one people, they drift between fires, their stories retold with different names, but the same sly smile. Ceremonies for the harvest stretch across tribes like roots beneath the soil, each one feeding the land in its own way. The Cherokee speak to the corn, offering songs that rise with the smoke from sacred fires. Farther west, the Zuni dance to call the rain, their feet pounding the dry earth, asking the sky to open its arms. Every dance, every song carries the same quiet plea, bless this land, let life continue. Healing comes from many places. The Ojibwe turn to the water, listening to the spirits that drift beneath the surface of lakes and rivers. A drop of water placed on the forehead of the sick is not just water, it is life, pulled from the veins of the earth itself. The Apache call on the mountain spirits, their masks painted in bright colors, their feet stirring dust that carries sickness away on the wind. Death is not an ending. The Lakota say the spirits walk west, crossing over into the land of the ancestors, while the Hopi believe the spirits sink into the earth, becoming part of the land that cradled them in life. The Choctaw say the dead rest for a time in the branches of the trees, their whispers rustling the leaves. Though the paths vary, the understanding remains, life does not simply fade, it transforms, slipping from one world to the next with the quiet grace of falling rain. The elders say that the spirits do not belong to one people alone. They drift like the clouds, touching one village, then moving on to the next. Some stories are shared across great distances, their edges softened by time, but their hearts intact. A star falling across the sky may mean one thing to the Ute and another to the Blackfoot, but both lift their eyes and feel the weight of something larger than themselves. The land is alive beneath every tribe's feet. The trees hum with old voices, and the mountains hold memories older than any living hand. Each people sees the land differently, some as a mother, others as a brother, but the love is the same. It is the understanding that shapes the hands that plant the fields, the songs that rise with the morning sun, and the stories whispered long after the fires burn low. Even when borders are drawn, when lines are carved into maps by those who do not hear the land, the spirits pay no mind. They move as they always have, stepping over rivers, crossing mountain ranges, and settling into the hearts of those who remember to listen. And so, the people continue to listen, ears pressed to the earth, waiting for the soft heartbeat that connects them all. The sky thickens, heavy with clouds that hang low and restless. The wind hushes, as if the world itself holds its breath. In that silence, something ancient stirs, waiting just beyond the veil of rain. A shadow flickers across the heavens, vast and swift, too large for any bird known to man. Then, without warning, the sky splits apart. Lightning tears through the clouds, and in that flash of blinding light, wings stretch wide, wings that seem to hold the storm itself. The elders say the thunderbird is not seen by ordinary eyes. It watches from the highest peaks, its talons gripping the bones of mountains, waiting for the moment when the world forgets to respect the sky. When drought cracks the land or hunger grips the people, the thunderbird stirs. It does not come gently. Its wings beat like war drums, shaking the earth and bending the trees until their roots cry out. Rain follows, not in soft drops, but in torrents that flood the rivers and drown the valleys. Yet, the people do not curse the rain. They stand beneath it, lifting their hands, knowing that with each storm comes life. Some say the thunderbird carries lightning in its claws, throwing it down at those who disrespect the land. Others whisper that the flash of its eyes alone can ignite the tallest pines. When the storms grow too fierce, offerings are left at the base of the mountains, smoke rising in thin streams, prayers whispered beneath the roar of thunder. Those prayers are not for mercy but for balance. The thunderbird does not destroy out of anger. It reminds. It teaches. It shows the strength of the sky, a force that cannot be tamed by human hands. In the plains, the warriors speak of the thunderbird with reverence, painting its likeness onto their shields and teepees, hoping its power will lend them strength. They say that those who see the thunderbird in the wild return changed, their eyes sharp as hawks, their hearts carrying the weight of thunder. The Pacific Northwest tribes carve its image into the tallest totems, its wings stretching toward the sky, as if holding it aloft. When the fog rolls in from the sea, and the forests fall into shadows, the people glance to those totems, knowing the thunderbird stands guard. There are stories of those who dared to climb the mountains where the thunderbird nests. Some return with feathers the size of canoe paddles, proof that they stood beneath its shadow. Others are never seen again, swallowed by the storms that coil around its home. The people do not mourn them. They say the thunderbird carries them to the place where the wind is born, and there they live forever, watching over the land as spirits of the storm. It is said that when the thunderbird cries out, its voice rolls across the sky, chasing away the darkness that clings to the edges of the world. In times of great need, the thunderbird's call can split open the heavens, allowing the sun to break through even the thickest storm. That cry does not echo with words. It speaks to something deeper, something ancient that stirs in the marrow of those who hear it. The animals grow still, the rivers pause, and for a heartbeat, the entire world listens. The feathers of the thunderbird are not soft like those of ordinary birds. They shimmer, edged with light, crackling with the power of storms. It is said that if a feather falls to the earth, it carries the rain wherever it lands, turning deserts into meadows and barren fields into seas of grain. These feathers are rare, hidden in the highest branches of trees struck by lightning. Those lucky enough to find one hold it close, knowing that to carry a feather of the thunderbird is to carry the promise of life itself. When the storms pass, and the land breathes in the wet scent of rain, the people say the thunderbird returns to its perch high above the world. But it never sleeps. It watches with eyes like burning coals, waiting for the next moment when the sky grows too quiet. Even on clear days, when the sun stretches across an endless blue, the faintest rumble in the distance serves as a reminder. The thunderbird is never far, and the sky belongs to no man. The children grow up hearing these stories, heads tilted to the stars, eyes scanning the horizon for the flicker of wings among the clouds. Some claim to see it, pointing to the far reaches of the sky where the clouds gather thick and dark. Others feel it in their bones, the heavy pulse of thunder echoing deep within, a reminder that the world is alive, powerful, and untamed. The elders smile quietly, knowing the thunderbird's presence is not measured by sight alone. It lives in the heartbeat of the storm, in the wind that bends the tallest trees, and in the rain that falls long after the clouds have gone. There are moments when the people forget the thunderbird, their lives slipping into the rhythm of planting and harvest, of days warmed by the sun and nights cooled by gentle breezes. But the thunderbird waits. It waits for the land to call out, for the sky to darken, and for the people to lift their eyes once more to the heavens, hands open, ready to receive the storm. The water never rests. Even when the surface is calm, shadows move beneath, curling like smoke in the deep. The elders say the river carries more than fish and stones. It holds old things, ancient and unseen, that linger just below the reflection of the sky. When the air grows thick and the wind smells like rain, some say you can catch a glimpse of something long and sinuous, scales glinting like wet stone. But only for a breath, then it is gone, slipping back into the silence of the current. The horned serpent does not rise for just anyone. Its body winds through the heart of rivers and lakes, its horns curling like branches heavy with dew. The people speak of it in hushed voices, not out of fear, but out of respect. Its eyes hold the weight of the water, and to see them is to understand the depths of things no man was meant to know. There are stories of warriors who stood at the edge of the Great Lakes and watched as the water split apart, the horned serpent lifting its head into the moonlight. Its scales rippled, each one catching the pale glow, casting patterns that danced across the rocks. Those who saw it spoke of a stillness that fell over the land, as if even the trees dared not breathe in its presence. Some fell to their knees, feeling the pull of something older than the land itself, a force that did not speak but was felt in the marrow of their bones. In the southeast, the rivers are thick with stories of the serpent's horns, said to glisten like silver when the sun sets. Children press their faces to the water's edge, hoping to see just a flicker beneath the surface. The elders warn them to step back, for the serpent does not like to be watched. It is not a creature to be summoned or chased. It appears when the balance of the land begins to shift, drawn to those who hold the fate of the people in their hands. There are tales of those who followed the horned serpent, trailing the sound of rushing water that seemed to speak their name. Some returned with strange stones, smooth and cold, said to hum softly at night. Others came back with scars that traced the shape of horns across their skin, eyes dark and distant as if they had gazed too long into the heart of the lake. But there are some who never returned at all, swallowed by the depths, their names whispered by the wind that schemes the surface of the water. The serpent is not cruel. It is a guardian, but one that moves by its own rules, bound by forces that cannot be swayed by prayers alone. When the land grows dry, and the rivers shrink into themselves, the people offer tobacco to the water, watching as the leaves drift along the current, carrying their hopes to the serpent's lair. Sometimes, the rains come. Other times, the river stays silent, as if waiting for something more. Those who walk the banks at dusk speak of lights that hover above the water, small and pale like fireflies. The elders say these lights are the breath of the horned serpent, rising from its nostrils as it sleeps beneath the stones. To follow them is to invite the unknown, for the lights do not always lead back to familiar shores. But for those who are lost, they are a guide, floating gently ahead, weaving through the reeds and branches until the trees stand and the village fires glow once more. In the Great Lakes, some believe the storms that roll over the water are the serpent's doing, its body twisting beneath the surface, stirring the waves. Fishermen who are caught in the storm call out its name, hoping for mercy, offering bits of their catch in return for safe passage. When the storm breaks, and the water calms, they leave the largest fish on the shore, letting the river take it back to the serpent. It is said that to find the horned serpent's scale is to hold a piece of the water's strength. These scales are rare, washing up on the banks after the heaviest rains. They shimmer faintly, cool to the touch, and those who carry them are said to speak with the voice of the river itself. But the scales are not gifts. They are left behind when the serpent sheds its skin, signs of renewal and change. To take one without understanding is to invite the serpent's gaze, and not all can withstand its stare. The land remembers the serpent's touch. Some rivers wind in strange patterns, their curves said to follow the path the serpent carved long ago. Lakes that never dry are believed to hold the serpent's reflection, rippling beneath the surface. Even the stones bear its mark, smooth and round, as if worn down by the passage of something far greater than water alone. On quiet nights, when the moon hangs low and the stars scatter across the sky, the people gather by the rivers. They listen to the soft lap of the water against the shore, the hum of insects rising and falling like the breath of the land itself. In those moments, the horned serpent feels close, not as a shadow beneath the waves, but as something that watches, patient and still, waiting for the next shift in the wind. The river keeps its secrets well. The serpent drifts beneath the surface, silent and unseen, but its presence lingers in every ripple, every drop of rain that falls to the earth. And when the water speaks, the people listen, knowing that the horned serpent's voice is not one to be ignored. The plain stretched endlessly, golden grass swaying beneath a sky heavy with silence. The sun hung low, its warmth barely touching the earth. 2 Lakota scouts rode ahead of their people, searching for game or signs of danger. The land, wide and open, seemed to hold its breath. Then, through the shimmer of heat rising from the ground, they saw her. A woman walked alone, her hair long and dark, flowing like a river over her shoulders. Her steps left no mark, and the air around her seemed lighter, as if even the wind paused to listen. She was wrapped in white, a robe of purest light draped around her, though there was no trail of dust upon it. One of the scouts, unable to resist the beauty that stood before him, reached for his bow. His companion, wiser and more careful, lowered his hand and warned him to show respect. But the warning came too late. As the scout drew his bow, the woman's eyes met his. In that instant, he crumbled to the ground, bones turning to dust as if the earth had claimed him in one breath. The other scout dropped to his knees, head bowed, heart pounding against his ribs. The woman stepped forward, her voice soft yet filled with something that made the air hum. She told him to rise and return to his people, for she would follow. When she arrived at the Lakota camp, the people gathered in quiet awe. There was no fear, only a sense that something sacred now walked among them. The elders listened as she spoke, her words weaving through the air like threads of silver. She brought with her a bundle wrapped in soft hide, held gently in her arms as if it carried the heart of the land itself. With slow hands, she unwrapped it, revealing the sacred pipe, carved from red stone. She lifted it to the sky, smoke rising from the bowl, curling upward until it disappeared into the heavens. The people watched in stillness as she explained that this pipe was a gift, a bridge between the Lakota and the spirits. With it, they could speak to the great mystery, their prayers carried on the breath of the smoke. The woman stayed with the Lakota for 4 days, each morning teaching them the ways of the pipe. Her voice held the weight of centuries, as if every word carried the memory of ancestors long gone. She showed them how to offer tobacco, how to face the 4 directions, and how to honor the land beneath their feet. Each ritual felt like the turning of a great wheel, the balance of life restored with every prayer. On the final day, she gathered the people beneath the open sky. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long across the camp. As the first stars blinked awake, she promised that as long as the Lakota honored the pipe and walked the path of peace, their people would endure. Then, as gently as she had come, she began to walk away. The people followed her gaze and saw a white buffalo calf standing on the edge of the horizon, its coat glowing in the fading light. As they watched, the calf lowered its head and stepped forward, each step transforming it. White turned to red, red to yellow, and yellow to black, until it faded into the night. The woman's figure shimmered beneath the moon, and as the wind passed through the grass, she was gone. Yet, the warmth of her presence lingered, woven into the smoke of the sacred pipe that still lay in the hands of the elders. The Lakota say she was more than a woman. She was a gift from the spirits, a reminder that the land listens and the sky watches. The white buffalo calf, rare and precious, is her sign, appearing when the people need guidance or when the balance of the world begins to shift. When the calf is born, the Lakota gather, knowing it is not just an animal, but a message carried by the wind, a promise that the sacred ways endure. Even now, the smoke of the pipe rises, curling toward the heavens. The land remembers her footsteps, and the people still wait, eyes turned to the horizon, hoping for the day when the white buffalo calf woman walks among them once more. The forest shifts when no one is looking. Branches creak where there is no wind, and leaves fall without cause. Some say it's just the weight of the wood settling into itself. But the elders know better. They say the Pukwudgie is near, watching from the shadows of the trees, small and sharp-eyed, grinning like a fox just out of reach. No one ever sees them coming. One moment, the path is clear, and the next, roots twist where there were none before. Hunters who grow too proud of their aim find their arrows missing by just a hair. Footprints appear beside them in the dirt, never more than a few steps behind. The air smells faintly of damp earth and pine, but beneath it lingers something else, something sly and restless, like laughter hiding behind the trees. It said that the Pukwudgie were once friends of the people, moving easily among the villages, sharing the woods with those who walked gently. But things change. The stories say that one day, a man forgot his manners, stepping too boldly into the heart of the forest. Maybe he spoke carelessly, or maybe he walked as if the land belonged to him. The Pukwudgie watched and listened, their eyes narrowing like the fading light. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. Now, they play by their own rules. They are not cruel, but they are not kind either. Mischief runs in their blood, curling like smoke around the edges of every step. Children who stray too far from the village find themselves spun around, paths looping back on themselves until the trees all look the same. But just when fear begins to sink in, a small figure appears between the branches, pointing silently toward home. It is never wise to thank them. The Pukwudgie dislike gratitude, it sticks to them like burrs. A simple nod will do. Then turn and walk away without looking back. Some nights, flickers of light dance along the forest's edge, soft and pale, leading travelers away from hidden dangers. The elders say the Pukwudgie does this out of duty, though they grumble the whole way through. The land is old, and the balance must be kept. Even tricksters have their burdens. But the Pukwudgie is no gentle guardian. When angered, their eyes burn low and steady, and the woods themselves seem to tighten around those who offend them. Hunters speak of arrows that veer off course, not because they missed, but because something unseen nudged them aside. Fishermen return to find their line snapped, as if something with small hands untied each knot one by one. Still, the people leave small offerings at the forest's edge. Bits of sweet bread or dried berries placed carefully beneath the old trees. Not gifts, just enough to show respect. The Pukwudgie watches from afar, sharp teeth flashing in the dark, never approaching while eyes are near. Once, a woman lost her way gathering herbs at dusk. The woods grew thick around her, the trail swallowed by shadows. She called out softly, not in fear, but with the voice of someone who knows the land listens. Somewhere nearby, the leaves rustled. Out from the undergrowth stepped a figure no taller than her waist, his face worn with age yet strangely childlike. He said nothing but raised one hand, pointing toward the village. When she glanced back, he was gone, only faint footprints left behind in the soft mud. The people say the Pukwudgie walks the line between light and shadow, never stepping fully into either. Some claim they have seen them in dreams, standing at the edge of the forest as if waiting for something long forgotten. Others insist they hear faint laughter carried on the wind, light and playful but laced with something ancient, a reminder that the woods are never truly empty. Even now, when the mist settles low in the early morning, those who pass through the forest tread carefully. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. The Pukwudgie watches from the branches, their small eyes gleaming, waiting to see if the people still remember how to walk with gentle feet. The first thing they notice is her eyes, dark, wide, and deep enough to drown in. She stands at the edge of the trees, half hidden by shadows, her hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders. There's something in the way she looks at them, soft yet wild, as if she belongs to the earth more than the world of men. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't need to. The tilt of her head, the quiet sway of her body, every movement hums with something that feels older than words. When she turns, they follow without thinking, feet moving before their minds catch up. The air feels heavy, thick with the sweet scent of damp leaves and distant rain. There's a rhythm to the way she walks, each step light but sure, like the soft press of hooves on moss. Her footprints are faint, barely touching the earth, but the sound of her steps lingers. Men have followed her before. Some return with eyes shadowed, speaking only in soft whispers, their hearts pulled tighter than a snare. Others never come back. The elders warn against chasing beauty too far into the trees, but the young never listen. Not until they see it for themselves. Beneath the hem of her dress, just below the soft curve of her legs, something shifts. Her feet, so delicate at first glance, are not feet at all. They are the slender, dark hooves of a deer, pressed into the dirt like a mark of things not meant to walk beside men. By the time they notice, it's already too late. The stories say the deer woman is not cruel, but she is not merciful either. She is a test, standing between those who respect the world and those who try to claim it. Some say she was once a woman, cursed or gifted by the spirits, her heart bound to the woods and the creatures that move within it. Others believe she has always been this way, watching over the land with eyes that see through the thin veil between the living and the unseen. Those who meet her at dusk speak of a strange longing that follows them, lingering in their bones like the ache of something lost. They remember the way she smiled, soft but distant, as if she held the weight of every heartbeat in her hands. But there are darker tales too, whispers of hunters who caught sight of her in the underbrush, bowstrings pulled tight, only to have the world twist around them. Trails looped back on themselves, and no matter how far they walked, they ended where they began. The forest felt thicker, the trees pressed closer, and the sun dipped faster behind the hills. One hunter claimed he shot at her once. His arrow flew true, striking the deer that lingered just beyond the clearing. But when he approached, there was no animal lying in the grass. Only a woman's footprints, leading deeper into the woods. He never hunted again. Some believe the deer woman is a spirit of love, appearing to those who hold kindness in their hearts, guiding them toward paths they might not see on their own. Others say she is a warning, a reminder that beauty can carry teeth, and the land listens even when no one else does. The people leave offerings at the edges of the forest, small bundles of cornmeal, flowers wrapped in soft cloth, or smooth stones kissed by streams. Not gifts, but acknowledgments, signs that they remember the old ways. Sometimes, in the morning light, the offerings are gone, and faint hoofprints weave between the trees. Even now, when the woods grow quiet and the sky blushes with the last light of day, there are those who feel her gaze. They say she watches with the eyes of someone who has seen too much and knows how easily hearts can break beneath the weight of their own desire. She waits there still, just beyond the veil of branches, her breath soft as the wind that rustles through the leaves. And if you catch sight of her standing alone at the forest's edge, look closely, but not too long. She might smile, just enough to make your heart flutter. And before you know it, your feet will start moving on their own. Coyote wasn't supposed to be there. But there he was, tail low, eyes bright, grinning like he owned the whole world. The fire had burned down to embers, and the people sat close, wrapped in heavy blankets against the night air. Coyote crept in just beyond the circle of light, where shadows stretched long and thin. He liked it that way, close enough to listen, far enough to slip away when trouble came knocking. Someone laughed softly, telling stories of old heroes and great hunts. But Coyote wasn't interested in those stories. He liked the ones that made people shift in their seats, glancing over their shoulders as if something might be watching. The stories about him. They said Coyote once stole the sun right out of the sky, tossing it around like a ball until he burned his paws. They said he sang to the moon until it slipped from its place, falling into the river with a splash so loud it woke the stars. And they said, though not too loudly, that if you weren't careful, Coyote would steal your voice right out of your throat, tuck it under his tail, and run laughing through the hills. The old woman tending the fire glanced into the darkness. "I know you're there," she said, stirring the coals with a stick. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered like the flames. Coyote's grin widened. He stepped closer, the soft crunch of his paws on dry grass the only sound. "I'm always here," he whispered, though his mouth never moved. Long ago, Coyote walked among the people more freely. He slipped into their camps, pretending to be a man, always up to something, sometimes foolish, sometimes clever. Once, he promised to bring rain by dancing until the sky opened. He danced so hard his feet tangled, sending him tumbling down the hillside. When he stood, bruised and breathless, clouds gathered overhead. But instead of rain, the sky laughed and shook out hailstones the size of fists. Another time, Coyote caught his reflection in a still pond. He sat for hours, admiring the stranger staring back at him. When the reflection refused to leave, Coyote grew jealous and splashed the water until it broke apart, shattering the sky above with it. The people say that's how lightning was born, Coyote's anger striking down from the heavens. But Coyote wasn't always a fool. There was a winter colder than any before. The people's fires shrank, their food stores ran low, and the wind howled louder than the wolves in the hills. The animals held council, deciding to keep their warmth to themselves. Bear slept, deer hid in the deepest woods, and rabbit burrowed far underground. Only Coyote stayed awake. He stretched out beneath the stars, his fur thin against the frost, listening to the hunger growing in the bellies of those too proud to beg. He knew better than to ask Bear for help or plead with deer. So, he climbed the tallest hill, where the wind cut sharp as stone, and howled until the sky cracked open. The stars blinked in surprise, and something old and quiet stirred. Snow fell, not heavy, but soft, like feathers brushing the ground. Enough to cover the tracks of the hunters and cool the burn in their stomachs. Coyote padded down the hill, proud of his work. But when he returned, he found the people roasting the last of their food over the fire. He licked his lips and sat at the edge of the circle, wagging his tail. "Just one bite," he said, though no one heard him speak. The people broke off a small piece of meat and tossed it toward him. He caught it mid-air, swallowing it whole. He stayed that night, his eyes half closed, listening to the crackle of flames and the soft hum of voices. By morning, he was gone, leaving only paw prints in the snow. They say Coyote never truly leaves. When the wind shifts suddenly or the fire sputters for no reason, he's there, watching and waiting. Not for food or warmth, but for the chance to stir things up, just to see what happens next. Raven spread his wings, black as midnight, his feathers glistening under a sky that had only just begun to open. The world was still asleep, wrapped in shadows, waiting for the first light to break. But Raven didn't wait for dawn. He never did. His eyes, sharp and knowing, scanned the earth below, restless and full of plans. He wasn't just any bird, he was the one who carried the power of both creation and mischief in his feathers. A small village sat nestled between tall trees and a wide river. The people there lived as they always had, without knowledge of the sun, the stars, or the seasons. Everything was a shadow, unseen, unheard, unexplored. Life, they thought, was only what was in front of them. But Raven knew better. He could feel the pulse of the world, its heartbeat, its breath, its hunger for something more. He perched on a high branch, gazing down at the people who were oblivious to the magic swirling just outside their reach. The world was still dark, and it would remain so until Raven decided otherwise. And he always decided. With a caw that echoed like thunder in the silent air, Raven took flight. He soared high above the earth, his wings slicing through the cold, thickened sky. He could hear the whispers of the winds and feel the pull of distant lands. His mind buzzed with all the things he could do, all the things that had yet to be made. There had to be light. There had to be sun. There had to be life in all its colors. With a mischievous glint in his eye, Raven flew across the world, pulling the stars from the skies like they were ripe fruit waiting to fall. He took the sun, wrapped it in his wings, and carried it to the edge of the earth, where the people had no idea what was coming. They only knew the cold and the dark. But Raven knew how to change that. With a flip of his feathers, he released the sun into the sky. The warmth spread quickly, touching the earth with its glow, turning the cold into something warm and new. The people blinked, squinting at the brightness they had never known. They marveled at the sunlight as it bathed everything in gold. But Raven wasn't done yet. His laughter rang out like the sound of cracking thunder, and he quickly found that his gift of light wasn't enough. No, it had to be more. It had to be full of all things the earth needed to thrive. So, Raven flew once again, higher and higher, and when he was sure he had the world's attention, he began to shape it. Raven gave them water, turning streams and rivers into lifelines. He gave them trees, strong and full of life, standing tall with their branches reaching for the sky. He gave them animals, all shapes and sizes, from the smallest mouse to the mightiest bear. He gave them fire to warm their hearts and hearths. And when the first snowfall came, Raven gave them the seasons, the changing of time, so they could mark the passing of days and years. But Raven was not just a creator. He was a trickster. And it wasn't long before he decided to teach the people a lesson, one that would be as bright as the sun and as dark as the night. One day, when the people were celebrating the new world Raven had created, he sneaked into their camp, disguised as a small, harmless bird. With a wink, he stole the people's food, pulled their fish from the water, and played his tricks until they laughed and begged for more. He led them through the woods and over rivers, always just out of reach, always just beyond their grasp. Raven's laughter echoed in the trees, bouncing off the mountains and across the rivers. He wasn't cruel, but he loved to play with those who forgot that nothing in the world came without a price. Even the sun, so bright and warm, was a gift that needed tending. One night, when the people had gathered by the fire, Raven perched on a rock near the flames. They watched him carefully, sensing that something was about to happen. Raven fluffed his feathers and let the silence settle around him. "I gave you light," he said, his voice as deep as the earth itself. "I gave you life and warmth, but you've forgotten the cost of these gifts. You think you own the sun, the stars, the sky, but they belong to the world. You think the trees and the rivers will always bend to your will, but they answer only to the earth." The people were quiet now, listening, understanding. They knew that Raven wasn't just the giver of gifts, but also the keeper of balance. Without his tricks, without his challenges, they would have grown complacent, forgetting to honor what they had been given. Raven's eyes glinted with wisdom and mischief. He spread his wings, rising into the air with the same grace he had when he first took the sun. As he flew, the people watched, and they knew that the world would never be the same. Raven had given them everything, but now, he would teach them to care for it. And so it was that Raven became both a creator and a trickster, a figure of both power and play. He shaped the world with his wings, giving life to everything that moved, but he also reminded the people that nothing was ever free. The sun would shine, the rivers would flow, the trees would grow, but it was up to the people to honor these gifts. Raven would not always be there to remind them. But that was his gift, too. The lesson. The understanding that creation and trickery are not separate, they are one, each needing the other to be complete. Raven, with his sharp mind and mischievous heart, had given the world everything it needed to survive. And when the world forgot, Raven would return, not to punish, but to remind them that life, and all its beauty and chaos, was always a gift to be earned. Nanabozo sat at the edge of the water, his long ears twitching with mischief. The wind whispered over the surface, and the trees leaned in, as if they knew something was about to happen. The air crackled with the kind of stillness that comes before laughter, or trouble. Nanabozo could never resist either. His reflection wavered in the ripples, but he wasn't fooled by his own image. He grinned, the kind of grin that held the weight of countless stories. A trickster, yes, but also something more. His paws held the shape of the world, molded by his jokes and his lessons, his missteps and his triumphs. He was part of the land, just as much as the rivers and skies, but unlike them, he never stood still. That day, the world felt quiet. Too quiet. Nanabozo hated when things were too neat, too simple. He reached into the water and pulled out a fish, letting it dangle for a moment before tossing it back with a splash. "Boring," he muttered. His ears twitched again. A bird landed nearby, tilting its head in curiosity. Nanabozo narrowed his eyes. "You look like you've been listening to things you shouldn't," he said, though he knew the bird couldn't speak back. Birds always heard more than they let on. Without warning, Nanabozo leapt to his feet, scattering leaves in his wake. The bird fluttered off, and Nanabozo's feet carried him swiftly into the forest. He wasn't running from anything, he was running toward whatever came next. His eyes darted between the trees. Somewhere, something needed fixing or breaking. Maybe both. Nanabozo's heart thrived in the space between chaos and creation. He passed by a village where smoke drifted lazily from the fires. The people were gathered, talking in hushed voices. Curious, he crept closer, crouching low. They were arguing over who owned the land near the river. Two brothers stood apart from the others, their faces red with anger. Nanabozo smirked. Arguments like these were like fresh berries, impossible to ignore. He picked up a small stone and tossed it near the brothers' feet. They glanced around, puzzled. Nanabozo covered his mouth to keep from laughing out loud. Then he stepped forward, bold as the sun, as if he'd been there all along. "Brothers," he called. "You argue over land, but have you asked the river what it thinks?" The brothers stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or scowl. Nanabozo continued. "The river runs where it pleases. It doesn't ask who owns the land. If you fight over something that flows, you'll be chasing water your whole life." One brother crossed his arms. "And what do you suggest, great hair?" Nanabozo grinned. "I suggest you race. First one to the farthest tree by the river wins the land." The brothers exchanged glances. It sounded foolish, but neither wanted to back down. With a nod, they agreed. As the brothers lined up, Nanabozo crouched by the starting point, tail twitching. "Ready, set, go." The brothers sprinted, feet pounding the earth. Nanabozo watched them with delight. Then, just as they neared the finish, he darted ahead, fast as a flash, and touched the tree first. He laughed so hard his sides ached. The brothers stumbled to a halt, panting. "You cheated," one shouted. Nanabozo held up his paws. "I didn't say I wouldn't join the race. You never asked." Their anger melted into reluctant smiles. The tension broke, and the village laughed along with them. The land, it seemed, was no longer the issue. Later that evening, Nanabozo sat under the stars, listening to the crackle of the fires. The brothers' argument had turned into a celebration. The river whispered nearby, and Nanabozo felt the weight of the world shift slightly, just the way he liked it. His mischief wasn't meant to harm. It was meant to remind. People got so caught up in their own importance that they forgot how to laugh, how to see beyond themselves. Nanabozo's tricks pulled at those threads, unweaving pride and stitching humility in its place. He lay back, gazing at the sky, the stars reflecting in his wide eyes. He wondered what else he could stir up tomorrow. Maybe he'd steal the clouds and make the sky clear for weeks. Or maybe he'd teach the birds to talk, just to confuse the humans. His tail flicked against the grass. There was always something to be done, and Nanabozo was never far from the heart of it. The wind carried a whisper through the tall grass, and somewhere in its curl of sound, laughter lurked, sharp and knowing. Iktomi was near. His 8 legs moved with the kind of grace that only someone who didn't fear falling could have. To him, the world was a thread to spin, twist, and knot as he pleased. Sometimes it snapped beneath his touch, but that was never enough to stop him. Iktomi watched the people from the shadows of a tree, his eyes gleaming like small beads of obsidian. They sat by the fire, listening to the elders speak of bravery and kindness. Iktomi clicked his tongue softly. Those stories were fine, but where was the fun in them? Where was the part where someone slipped, tumbled, and rose again, laughing at their own foolishness? He crept closer, weaving through the tall grass with a slowness that could have been mistaken for patience if one didn't know him better. The people never saw him coming until he wanted them to. That was his favorite part. By the edge of the firelight, a young boy sat alone, tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick. His shoulders slumped. Iktomi tilted his head, curious. Here was someone untouched by the stories the elders told. That was an opportunity. "You draw like you've lost something," Iktomi said, stepping into the light. The boy jumped, his eyes wide. "Who are you?" Iktomi smiled, his teeth catching the glow of the fire. "Iktomi," he answered simply, as if the name wasn't stitched into 100 cautionary tales. The boy frowned. "My grandmother says you're a trickster." Iktomi crouched low, lowering his voice to a whisper. "And what's so bad about tricks? Sometimes a little confusion is the best teacher." The boy hesitated. "I don't need to be tricked. I just want to be brave like the warriors." Iktomi's legs twitched with excitement. "Brave, Well, bravery is often tangled up in foolishness. Let me show you something." He plucked a long blade of grass and began to weave, his fingers faster than the boy's eyes could follow. In moments, the grass had become a small spider, its legs curling delicately beneath it. "Hold out your hand," Iktomi said. The boy hesitated but did as he was told. Iktomi placed the spider gently on his palm. "Now," Iktomi whispered, "watch carefully." The spider twitched, its legs unfolding slowly. It began to move, crawling up the boy's arm. The boy gasped but didn't pull away. "It won't bite," Iktomi assured him. "But if you let it reach your shoulder without fear, it will tell you a secret." The boy stayed still, though his breath came quickly. The spider climbed higher, its tiny legs leaving faint tickles in their wake. When it finally reached his shoulder, the boy looked to Iktomi expectantly. "What's the secret?" he asked. Iktomi grinned. "You already know it. You didn't flinch, did you? You let fear crawl over you and stayed still. That's bravery." The boy blinked, processing the words. His lips curled into a small smile. But Iktomi wasn't finished. "Of course," he added, "sometimes spiders do bite." The boy's smile faded instantly. He slapped at his shoulder, sending the grass spider tumbling to the ground. Iktomi burst into laughter, his legs shaking with delight. The boy glared at him. "That wasn't fair." "Fair?" Iktomi said, wiping a tear from his eye. "Life isn't fair. Why should stories be?" The boy opened his mouth to argue, but then he laughed too. The sound caught Iktomi by surprise, soft and honest. "You're strange," the boy said. "But maybe you're right." Iktomi's smile lingered as he faded back into the darkness. His work was done for the night. The boy would remember. That was all Iktomi ever really wanted, not to harm, not to frighten, but to plant the seeds of stories that people would carry long after he was gone. As the fire burned low, the wind carried that faint, sharp laughter once more. It whispered between the trees, wrapping itself around the village like silk spun from mischief and wisdom alike. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows that twisted and flickered across the desert floor. An old man sat near the edge of the light, his eyes narrowed as if searching the darkness for something no one else could see. "Don't whistle at night," he said suddenly, his voice as dry as the air. The children around him fell silent, their laughter fading like smoke. "Why not?" one of them asked, though his voice trembled. The old man poked at the fire with a stick, watching the embers rise and vanish. "Because something might whistle back." For a moment, the only sound was the distant howl of a coyote. But the old man wasn't talking about coyotes. Far from the fire, where the shadows thickened, something moved, too quick to be caught by the eye, but heavy enough to stir the dust. It stayed just beyond the edge of the light, where the desert seemed to stretch forever. A woman in the group pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her eyes flicking nervously toward the darkness. She knew the stories. Everyone did. Stories whispered in low voices, stories meant to be warnings. There were those who could walk with the skin of beasts. Not as men dressed in hides, but as creatures themselves, shifting from human to animal with nothing but a glance. Skinwalkers, they called them. Yinald Lucia. The boy closest to the fire shuffled closer to his grandmother, his heart pounding as the wind stirred the dry grass behind them. "They don't come near fire, do they?" he asked quietly. The old man didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the blackness stretching out behind them, his grip tightening slightly on the stick in his hand. "No," he said at last. But there was no comfort in his voice. There were rules, of course. Don't stare into the dark too long. Don't call out names after sundown. Never, ever speak of them lightly. But the thing about skinwalkers, the thing no one liked to say aloud, was that they had once been human. A shiver ran through the crowd as if the thought had passed silently from one to the next. The story said that to become one, you had to trade something away. Something that couldn't be taken back. Some whispered it was a piece of your soul. Others said it was worse. A family member. A life. A betrayal that left a scar no fire could burn away. The boy near the fire glanced at his grandmother again, searching for reassurance, but her eyes were fixed on the shadows beyond the fire. She hadn't blinked in some time. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest sound, like the soft padding of hooves, but too heavy, too deliberate. The old man slowly set the stick down. "Time to sleep," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The fire's low." No one argued. Blankets were pulled tighter, and the children huddled closer to the adults. The fire wasn't out, but it didn't feel warm anymore. As the flame shrank, the shadows grew. Somewhere out in the desert, far from the reach of the fire's glow, something watched. Not with eyes, but with the kind of awareness that presses down on the back of your neck and makes you walk a little faster, even when you know nothing's there. But in the Navajo lands, sometimes there is. The stars felt closer that night, as if the sky had been stretched thin over the earth. The fire burned low, barely strong enough to hold back the cold that crept across the plains. A Lakota elder sat in silence, gazing upward with eyes that seemed to recognize something beyond the stars themselves. "Long ago," he whispered, the weight of his voice settling over the small gathering, "they came down to us." The children watched him carefully, their faces flickering in the firelight. One boy shifted uncomfortably, feeling small under the endless sky. The stars didn't just twinkle tonight, they pulsed, like quiet heartbeats scattered across the heavens. "The star people," the elder continued, "have always been there. Watching. Listening." His gaze never left the sky. "They are not gone. They never left." A hush fell over the circle, and even the crackling fire seemed distant. "They walked among us once," the elder said, his voice barely louder than the wind. "Not as spirits. Not as animals. As people." The girl sitting closest to him swallowed hard, the hair on her arms standing on end. She could feel something pressing at the edges of her thoughts, like a memory that didn't belong to her. "They were tall," the elder said softly. "Taller than any man. Their eyes," his voice trailed off, as if the words refused to come. He glanced at the children, his lips thinning. Their eyes were full of light. Not just sunlight, not moonlight. Starlight. The boy sitting across from him dared to look up. The stars above seemed brighter now, sharp enough to pierce through the dark. "They came when the world was young," the elder said, rubbing his hands together slowly as if trying to warm them. "When the land was still soft and the mountains remembered their own birth." The wind shifted, and something stirred in the tall grass just beyond the light. "They taught our people," the elder continued. His voice had changed, softer now, almost reverent. "How to listen to the earth. How to speak to the rivers and to know the sky by the way it breathes at dawn." The stars above flickered again, and for a fleeting second, the firelight seemed to stretch farther than it should, as if reaching toward the sky. "They didn't speak with words," the elder said. "Not like we do. They spoke through dreams, through the way the wind touches your skin, through the shadows that dance when the fire grows low." The girl's heart quickened. She thought of the strange dream she had the night before, of tall figures standing in the distance, their eyes glowing like distant stars. "What happened to them?" a small voice finally asked, cutting through the silence. The elder's gaze shifted to the boy who had spoken, but he didn't answer right away. His eyes softened, though the sadness in them was hard to miss. "They returned to the stars," he said simply. "But they left something behind." The boy frowned. "What did they leave?" The elder leaned forward, his face barely lit by the dying fire. "Us," he said, his voice almost too soft to hear. "We are their children." A breeze moved through the circle, and for a moment, the stars seemed to shimmer in response, as if agreeing. The fire popped, sending a brief spray of embers into the night. The elder smiled faintly, glancing up once more. "They still watch," he said, his voice steady now. "Sometimes, if you sit very still, you can feel them watching. You might see their shadows stretched across the sky, or hear them in the hush before dawn." The girl's eyes flicked upward, searching the heavens. Every star felt sharper, closer, as if one of them might blink and reveal itself as something more. As the fire faded into glowing embers, no one spoke. Each child lay awake beneath the stars long after the elder's voice had gone quiet. And far above them, high in the sky, the stars pulsed softly, watching. The sun was bleeding. It hung low over the horizon, swollen and red, sinking behind the distant line of trees. An old man stood at the edge of the village, watching in silence as shadows stretched long over the earth. "The sun is tired today," he said quietly, as if speaking to someone just out of sight. A child tugged at his sleeve, her wide eyes reflecting the orange glow. "Why does it look like that?" she whispered. The old man knelt, his bones creaking with the weight of years, and pointed toward the sky. "That's not just the sun," he said. "It's the face of someone far older than this land." The girl frowned, tilting her head. "She watches over us," he continued, his voice soft but certain. "Every day, she climbs into the sky, carrying the light on her back. And every night, she rests, but not without leaving someone to watch in her place." The child's eyes flickered to the rising moon, pale and small behind them. "Is the moon her son?" she asked. The old man's lips curved into the faintest smile, but his eyes held something else, something heavier. "Her brother," he corrected gently. "They don't always agree, but they never leave each other alone." The wind stirred the tall grass around them, and the old man's gaze drifted upward. "A long time ago," he said, "the sun and the moon walked here, where we stand now. Not as light, but as people. The sun was fierce, her heart burned with fire. The moon, he was quiet, but clever. His light was cool, but sharp enough to cut through the dark." The girl's grip on his sleeve tightened as he spoke. "They argued, just like brothers and sisters do," the old man said. "The sun wanted to light the world all at once. She thought the people should always see the land clearly, never hiding from anything. But the moon, he believed there had to be shadows. Places where people could rest, where dreams could grow." The girl nodded slowly, as if trying to understand. "They fought so fiercely that the sky trembled," the old man said. His eyes darkened with the memory, even though the story belonged to a time long before him. Their voices cracked the air, and the land split beneath their feet. The rivers rose, and the stars turned away. The fire in the distance flickered, casting thin lines of gold across the ground. "But they loved the world too much to let it break," he continued, his voice softening. "So, they made a promise." The girl's breath caught. The sun agreed to shine during the day, guiding the hunters and keeping the fields warm. The moon promised to rise at night, softening the dark and guarding the sleeping children. She smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the pale light that was growing stronger in the sky. "But there are times," the old man added quietly, "when they miss each other. That's when you see them both, standing together in the same sky." The girl's eyes widened. "On those days," he said, "they remember the time when they walked side by side. And if you listen very carefully, you might hear them speaking, whispers in the wind, or in the rustling leaves." The child stepped closer, the warmth of the old man's hand wrapping around hers. "But why does the sun bleed?" she asked again, her voice barely above a breath. The old man's eyes softened. "She isn't bleeding," he said gently. "That color is her heart. At the end of the day, when she lowers herself to rest, she lets a little of it show." The girl stared at the horizon, where the last sliver of the sun was slipping away. "She loves this place," the old man said simply. "Enough to leave pieces of herself behind." The child blinked, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw something more than light in the fading sun, a face, warm and knowing, disappearing beyond the trees. Later that night, as the village slept, the moon rose higher. Its light touched every corner of the land, slipping into places the sun couldn't reach. And somewhere far away, the sun watched from behind the horizon, waiting for her turn to return. The wind whispered first. It slid over the dry grass, curling around the stones and pressing against the thin walls of the village. The people listened, heads slightly tilted, as if expecting the wind to speak louder. A child lay curled by the fire, eyes half-lidded, heavy with sleep but fighting it. Across the flame sat his grandmother, hands worn and creased like the earth after rain. She gazed into the fire as if she could see something beyond the light. Long ago, she began, and though her voice was quiet, it carried like the wind, soft but certain. The child stirred, blinking slowly as the flames crackled. There was nothing but sky and dirt. They stretched out forever, but they never touched. The wind hummed again, brushing the grandmother's hair across her face. She tucked it back with slow fingers, her eyes fixed on the fire. The Sky Father looked down from his place, watching the land. He was strong, his hands full of storms and sun, his breath the wind itself. But no matter how far he reached, he could never hold the earth. The child frowned, turning his head slightly. And beneath him, the grandmother continued, lay the Earth Mother. She was wide and steady. Her body was soft with grass, and her heart beat in time with the rivers. The child's fingers curled into the blanket, drawn closer by the story. The Sky Father watched her for a long time. The way the mountains rose along her spine and the valleys dipped low like gentle sighs. But the Earth Mother never looked up. She kept her eyes on the seeds in her hands, pressing them into the soil. And so, the Sky Father waited. Every day, he sent his light down, warming her skin and chasing away the shadows. At night, he pulled the stars close, hoping she might notice the way they sparkled just for her. But the Earth Mother kept working, her hands full of growing things. One day, the Sky Father could wait no longer. He gathered all the clouds he had and let them burst. Rain poured down over the Earth Mother, soaking her skin and filling the empty spaces between her hills. The grandmother paused, watching the flames dance higher for a moment before lowering again. When the Earth Mother felt the rain, she lifted her face for the first time. She looked at the Sky Father and smiled. The fire crackled loud, as if agreeing with the words. The earth was never the same after that, the grandmother said, her eyes catching the reflection of the flames. Where the Sky Father's rain touched the Earth Mother's soil, life sprang up. Trees rose tall, stretching toward the sky. Rivers wove through the land like veins. And the wind, their first child, ran between them, carrying their voices to each other. The child stared at the fire, imagining the wind as something alive. But the Sky Father could never stay, the grandmother said softly. He was too big, too wide to rest on the ground. And the Earth Mother could not rise, her roots held her close to the land. The wind returned, tugging lightly at the edges of the blanket. So they stay apart, the grandmother whispered. But when the wind blows, that's them speaking. When the rain falls, that's the Sky Father's hand reaching for the Earth Mother. The child's eyelids drooped, but he kept listening, hanging on the final words as if they might slip away. And when the flowers bloom, the grandmother added, leaning closer, that's the Earth Mother smiling back at him. The fire shrank low, and the wind moved again, so soft, it could almost be mistaken for the earth breathing. The first time the lights danced, the boy thought the sky was alive. He stood in the snow, breath curling in the cold air, eyes wide. The world around him was silent, but the sky rippled with color, green and red and purple threads weaving above his head. It looked like the heavens were moving, shifting with something unseen, something older than the land itself. His grandmother's voice drifted over the wind. They see you, she said, standing a little way behind him, wrapped in heavy fur. Her eyes never left the lights. The boy's heart thudded. Who? He asked, stepping closer to her. She smiled softly, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening like snowdrifts. The spirits, she whispered. The ones who came before us. The boy stared harder at the sky, as if he might see faces in the swirling light. They gather when the air grows cold, his grandmother continued. They come to dance, to remind us they are still watching. The lights twisted, flickering brighter for a moment before fading again. Are they happy? The boy asked, gripping his mitten tighter. His grandmother tilted her head slightly. Sometimes, she said. But not always. The boy's breath hitched. They are not like us, she added, her voice low. They remember things we have forgotten, Sometimes they call out for us to listen. The boy felt his skin prickle under his coat. Listen for what? His grandmother knelt slowly, her knees sinking into the snow. For the footsteps, she whispered. The boy's eyes flickered toward the ground, where snow stretched untouched around them. Some say the lights are spirits playing a game, she said, brushing snow from her mitten. They chase each other across the sky, laughing as they run. But others say, her eyes narrowed slightly, glinting in the faint glow. They are hunters. The boy swallowed. When the lights race quickly, she said, it means they are running after something. If you whistle, she stopped, her breath hanging in the air like frost. The boy waited, eyes locked on her face. They might come closer, she finished softly. The wind stirred the snow at their feet. Did you ever try? He asked, barely above a whisper. His grandmother looked at him for a long time, and for a moment, the lights faded almost completely. I did, she said at last. The boy's pulse quickened. What happened? Her eyes flickered toward the sky. They stopped dancing, she said, her voice dropping to a hush. They listened. And then, they moved closer. The boy's mouth felt dry. Did they see you? He asked, barely daring to blink. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Yes, she said. And they knew my name. The lights flared suddenly, spilling across the sky in wide, sweeping arcs. The boy stared, his heart racing. I think they know yours too, she whispered. The boy shivered, not from the cold, but from something else, something stirring deep in his chest. The wind carried their breath away, leaving nothing but the soft crackle of snow beneath their boots. The lights twisted again, curling like smoke across the stars. And somewhere, faint but certain, footsteps echoed softly in the distance. The sky was still dark when the old man woke. The air felt heavy with silence, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He rose from his blanket, careful not to wake the others, and stepped out of the lodge. The cold bit at his skin, but he didn't pull his robe tighter. His eyes were already searching the horizon. There it was. The first faint glimmer. The morning star. His heart stirred at the sight of it. A small, steady light standing alone against the vast stretch of night. It wasn't the brightest star, not the largest, but it never failed to rise. No matter how dark the night had been, no matter how long, it always returned. He remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell. Long nights by the fire, with shadows flickering on the lodge walls. The morning star, his grandfather said, was a promise. A sign that no matter what shadows crept into their lives, the light would find its way back. The old man's gaze lingered, and his chest ached with something he couldn't name. There were nights, his grandfather warned, when the morning star was the only thing left to hold on to. Nights when storms swallowed the land, when the people's prayers felt too small to reach the heavens. On those nights, it wasn't the fire that kept them warm. It was the thought of that small star, waiting quietly beyond the clouds, ready to rise when the skies cleared. The old man let his breath out slowly. The younger ones didn't look for the star the way he did. They were strong, their hearts full of the world that stretched before them. But the old man had seen too many seasons. He knew how shadows could creep in, soft at first, then sudden and sharp. He knew what it was to wait for light. He thought of his own son. He had been gone for 3 winters now. The old man remembered the last time he saw him, standing at the edge of the village, the dawn just beginning to color the sky. His son had turned back, just for a moment, and in that moment, the morning star hung bright above them. The old man didn't say anything then. He didn't need to. The star had said enough. Now, every morning, the old man stood in the same place. The village slept behind him, but he waited, just in case. The cold pressed deeper into his bones, but he stayed where he was. The horizon was growing lighter now, pale blue creeping into the edges of the night. The morning star still shone, but soon it would fade, swallowed by the rising sun. It didn't matter. The old man smiled softly. The star had done its work. It had watched through the night, standing alone when the rest of the world lay in darkness. And when the sun rose, the star didn't disappear. It rested. It waited. And tomorrow, it would return. As the first light spilled over the land, the old man turned back toward the village. His footsteps were slow, but his heart felt lighter. The sky behind him brightened, but even as the day began, he knew the star was still there. Waiting. The river was quiet at first, just a soft ribbon of silver under the moon. Trees lined its edges, their dark shapes leaning close as if listening. Somewhere downstream, a branch cracked, but the sound faded quickly, swallowed by the water's gentle hum. The girl knelt at the bank, her hands cupped to gather the cold water. She paused. The river was watching her. She felt it before she saw anything, a weight, a presence just beyond her vision. The air thickened. The trees, the stones, even the small ripple of the current felt different, like they belonged to someone else now. Her grandmother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. Don't take more than you need. The river is alive. It has eyes. Her hands trembled, and the water slipped through her fingers. A shadow moved. Not a fish. Not something ordinary. It was slower, heavier, just beneath the surface. She leaned forward, heart pounding so loud she thought the river might hear it. There. Two pale eyes blinked from the water's edge, so faint they could have been reflections from the moon. But they weren't. They held steady, and they blinked again. The girl sat back carefully, not breaking eye contact. Her grandmother once said the river spirits didn't like to be stared at directly, but turning away too quickly could offend them. It was always a dance, one of quiet respect, careful movements. The old stories whispered through her head. Some said the spirits were protectors, guardians of the land's most precious veins. Others warned of their anger, their cold touch dragging careless souls beneath the surface. But no matter the version, the message was the same. The river doesn't forget. She thought of her uncle, gone now for many years. He had crossed this river once during a season of drought. His feet sank into the dry bed, cracking the soft mud beneath him. Her grandmother scolded him afterward. Even when the water is low, the river still listens. That summer, the rains came harder than anyone had expected. The river rose overnight, spilling into the fields, curling around their village like a serpent. When the water finally pulled back, her uncle stood at the bank and whispered an apology into the wind. The river forgave him. But it never looked at him the same way again. The girl's eyes flicked back to the pale gaze beneath the water. It hadn't moved, but she felt no malice in it. She dipped her fingers slowly and let them drift across the surface, a silent gesture of respect. The eyes blinked once more, and then the shape dissolved, slipping back into the deeper currents. She let out the breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The river softened around her again, as if sighing in relief. Crickets began their song from the reeds, and the wind carried the scent of wet stone and moss. Her grandmother always said the spirits didn't ask for much, just acknowledgement. A nod to their existence. A small offering left by the water's edge, even if it was just a quiet word spoken into the night. The girl stood and stepped carefully away from the bank, her eyes never leaving the surface of the water. She knew the spirit was still there, somewhere beneath the shimmering skin of the river, watching as she walked away. And she whispered, just as her grandmother once did, "Thank you for letting me pass." The wind came without warning. One moment the forest was still, the next it stirred like something had awakened. The leaves trembled, not from the cold, but as if they recognized the presence that moved between them. The branches swayed, bending in quiet reverence. A boy stood alone on the hill, watching the tall grass ripple in waves around him. His eyes squinted against the sudden gust that brushed past his face, tangling his hair and lifting it like unseen fingers. He didn't move. He had heard the stories. His grandfather once told him the wind was more than air. It carried voices. It whispered the names of those who had walked this land long before his time. "Listen carefully," his grandfather said, "because the wind remembers everything." The boy closed his eyes. The wind shifted, curling around him in soft circles, as if testing him. There was a faint sound beneath the rush, something almost like a sigh or a word just out of reach. His breath caught. It wasn't the first time he felt it. A year ago, during the late summer storms, the wind had spoken louder. It rattled the shutters of their small house, slipping through the cracks and swirling in the corners. His mother said the wind was restless, unsettled. But his grandfather sat by the fire and smiled softly. "It's only trying to get our attention," he said. "It carries messages, you know. Some of them are warnings. Others are gifts." That night, the wind had howled. It pulled at the edges of the trees, bending them until they creaked under its weight. But just before dawn, it softened, falling quiet and gentle like a breath after tears. His grandfather passed away the next day. The boy opened his eyes, standing on the hill now, the weight of that memory settling in his chest. The wind brushed against him again, softer this time. He thought maybe it remembered him too. In the old stories, the wind was alive, born from the sky and given its voice by the first spirits who shaped the world. It carried prayers to the mountains and guided hunters through dense forests. It could steal a voice from the unkind and return it to those who listened with an open heart. His grandfather always said the wind was the most honest of all things. It couldn't lie. It moved as it pleased, stirring the world whether it was ready or not. Now, as the boy stood with his face tilted toward the sky, he felt that same honesty. The wind didn't try to hide its presence. It tugged at his sleeve, playful but insistent. He spoke quietly, letting his words slip into the open air. "I remember you." The wind swirled sharply, curling around his shoulders and rustling the dry grass at his feet. A crow lifted from a nearby tree, its wings catching the same current that circled the boy. The bird glided, rising with the gust until it disappeared into the pale clouds. His grandfather had told him about the crows too. "They know the wind better than we do. Watch them when you're unsure. They always follow where it leads." The boy watched the crow disappear, the wind trailing after it like a shadow. The hill fell quiet again, but the air still hummed faintly around him. He knew it wasn't truly gone. The wind never left completely. It lingered, waiting for someone to notice. He stepped carefully down the hill, feeling the weight of the wind at his back, steady like a hand guiding him forward. His grandfather's voice echoed softly in his mind. "The wind will always bring you home." The first spark danced to life in the dark. Small, almost delicate, but it held a strange weight, like it already knew what it could become. The dry wood crackled softly beneath it, curling inward as the tiny flame stretched higher. A breath of wind passed through the trees, and the fire shivered but did not die. A young girl sat across from the fire, her knees pulled to her chest. She stared at the flickering light, watching the way it moved like something alive. Her grandmother sat beside her, silent and still, but the fire reflected in her eyes as if it had been there for years. "It listens, you know," her grandmother said, voice low. The girl glanced up. "Fire?" she asked. Her grandmother nodded, poking the edge of the fire with a long stick. Sparks scattered into the night air, rising and fading like little stars. "It remembers who treats it kindly, and who doesn't." The flames twisted at that moment, flaring a little brighter. The girl leaned back, unsure if the fire had heard her heartbeat. "Is it dangerous?" she asked quietly. Her grandmother smiled, but it wasn't the soft kind of smile the girl was used to. It carried something heavier, something worn and fragile at the same time. "Fire is always dangerous. But that doesn't mean it's cruel." The girl let her eyes fall back to the flames. She thought of the stories her father used to tell, the ones where fire wasn't just a tool but a spirit. It had a name. A voice. It walked beside warriors, lighting their way, but could turn against them if they became reckless. She remembered one story in particular, the one about the village that had grown too proud. Her father's voice echoed softly in her mind. They thought the fire belonged to them, that they could make it bow. So, the fire rose higher than the tallest tree and swallowed the land in one night. but when the ashes cooled, new grass grew. And the people knelt, thanking the fire not for its rage, but for what it left behind. The girl's eyes lingered on the edge of the fire pit, where the embers glowed faintly in the dark. She wondered if fire ever felt lonely. It consumed everything it touched, yet it never stayed. "Why does it leave nothing behind?" she whispered. Her grandmother turned toward her, the flames reflecting in her eyes like tiny suns. "It doesn't leave nothing," she said softly. "It leaves space. For something else to grow." The fire crackled louder then, as if agreeing. The girl watched the flames flicker and dance, curling toward the sky. She thought about the trees that once stood where the fire now burned, trees that would return someday, taller and stronger than before. But she also thought about the other side of fire. The way it could take more than it gave. Her grandmother shifted closer, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "The fire isn't just here to destroy," she said gently. "It's here to remind us to care for the things we love. To hold them gently. If we forget, the fire remembers for us." The girl nodded, her eyes never leaving the flames. The wind brushed against her cheek, carrying the faint scent of smoke. She wondered if fire could hear the wind, if they whispered to each other in the dark. Her grandmother slowly rose to her feet, leaving the girl alone by the fire. But the warmth lingered, curling around her like an old friend. The girl stretched her hands toward the flames, feeling the heat press against her palms. She didn't pull away. In that moment, she thought fire might not be so different from people. It could burn too brightly. It could leave scars. But it could also bring warmth to cold hands, light to dark paths, and life to the land that had long been quiet. She smiled faintly, closing her eyes as the fire crackled on, steady and watchful in the heart of the night. The trees didn't move, but something in the forest was watching. It wasn't menacing, not exactly. It felt old. Patient. Like the land itself was breathing just beneath the surface. The wind carried the faint creak of branches rubbing together, but the sound was almost like a voice, low and distant, speaking in words no one could quite understand. A boy stood at the edge of the clearing, toes curling into the soft moss. He had been warned not to step beyond the line where sunlight still touched the earth. "The forest past there belongs to others," his mother had said. "They don't take kindly to being disturbed." But curiosity is louder than caution in young hearts. He stepped forward, the grass brushing his ankles as if trying to pull him back. The air grew cooler with each step, and shadows stretched longer between the trees. The forest closed in slowly, wrapping itself around him in quiet folds of green and brown. A branch snapped in the distance. He froze. There was no wind. Not anymore. The boy glanced around, his breath shallow. The forest was too still. A gentle rustle pulled his gaze upward. Perched in the tallest tree was a figure, not a bird, not a person, but something in between. Its skin was bark, its hair long and twisted like vines. It had no eyes, but the boy could feel its gaze settle heavily on him. The boy lowered his head, remembering his grandmother's stories. If you see them, don't run. They don't chase. They just remember. And the forest never forgets. His heart thudded in his chest, but he didn't move. The figure stayed motionless, but the air felt thicker, charged with something the boy couldn't name. The tree it perched and creaked softly, as though shifting its roots deeper into the ground. "Why did you come here?" the wind seemed to whisper. The boy didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could. Another sound, this time from the forest floor. Small shapes moved between the trees, barely visible but present. They drifted through the undergrowth, touching leaves and trailing fingertips along fallen logs. Wherever they passed, the forest seemed to hum, the leaves trembling slightly as if greeting old friends. The boy realized then, this place wasn't empty. It never had been. A branch dipped lower beside him, though nothing had touched it. The boy stared at the spot for a long time before lifting his hand to place it gently on the bark. It was warm. His grandmother's voice returned to him. "The spirits of the trees are not like us. They don't know words the way we do, but they listen to the quiet parts of the heart. If you speak softly enough, they might even answer." The boy pressed his palm more firmly against the tree. In the silence that followed, he thought he felt something faint, like a heartbeat deep within the wood. The figure above shifted at last, stepping lightly along the branch before disappearing into the canopy. The forest seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had quietly woven itself around the clearing. The boy took a step back, his hand lingering on the tree for one last moment before he turned toward home. The spirits didn't follow. They stayed hidden between the branches, content to watch from the shadows. When he returned to the village, his mother looked at him for a long time without speaking. She didn't scold him. She didn't need to. The boy's eyes held the weight of someone who had seen things he couldn't quite explain, and she recognized that weight as one she had carried long ago. Later that night, when the stars were bright and the fire burned low, the boy whispered to the trees outside his window. He wasn't sure if they heard, but he thought he saw the branches sway, just slightly, against the windless sky. The mountains never seemed far until the day she climbed them. They had always been there, rising like watchful giants over the valley, their peaks wrapped in clouds like shawls drawn against the cold. Her grandmother used to say the mountains weren't just rock and snow. They had hearts. And those hearts belonged to something older than anyone could name. She remembered those words now, standing at the base where the wind cut sharp and thin against her cheeks. The trail was narrow, twisting between pine and stone, but she didn't hesitate. The sun was slipping lower behind the peaks, staining the sky in soft orange streaks. She had to keep moving. With each step, the air felt heavier. Not with exhaustion, but with something else, like invisible eyes watched from behind the boulders and trees. Her footfalls seemed too loud against the hush that clung to the slope. Even the wind barely whispered here. Her grandmother's voice came back, soft and distant. "The spirits on the mountain don't speak in words. They listen. They feel the weight you carry." She pressed forward, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The trail bent sharply ahead, leading to a narrow pass where cliffs rose steeply on either side. The sun had dipped lower, shadows stretching long and thin across the rocks. She paused. There, carved into the stone face ahead, were faint etchings, weathered by time but still there. Spirals. Animals. Hands. Her grandmother had brought her here once, years ago, and traced those markings with worn fingers. "This is their mark," she had said. "The spirits leave signs for those who pay attention." She knelt beside the carvings, running her palm over the rough surface. The stone felt warm despite the cold air. As she touched it, the wind shifted, just slightly. The air felt different now. Thicker. Quieter. She looked up, and there, at the edge of the cliff, stood a figure. It wasn't a person, not exactly. Broad-shouldered, wrapped in robes of shifting light and shadow, the figure watched her with eyes like burning coals. She couldn't move. Her heart pounded, but her feet stayed rooted to the ground. The spirit didn't speak. It didn't have to. She felt its presence as clearly as the ground beneath her. There was strength in the way it stood, like part of the mountain itself had risen to greet her. She lowered her head slightly, just enough to show respect without looking away. The wind pressed harder against her back, almost nudging her forward. She rose slowly, keeping her gaze steady as she stepped past the carvings and deeper along the path. The spirit didn't follow, but the weight of its gaze lingered. Higher she climbed, the trees thinning until only jagged stone remained. Her breath frosted in the air, and the sky dimmed to soft purple. At last, she reached the crest, a narrow ledge overlooking the valley below. The village looked so small from here, tucked between winding rivers and golden fields. She knelt, pressing her hands into the earth. Her grandmother had told her the mountaintop wasn't a place to ask for things. It was a place to listen. So she did. The wind curled around her, gentle now, carrying faint echoes of something older than words. The spirit's presence had faded, but she felt it still, woven into the rocks beneath her, the sky above, the bones of the mountain itself. She closed her eyes, and in that quiet, she could almost hear her grandmother's voice again, carried softly on the wind. The fire had long since burned down to embers, but no one left the circle. The air hung heavy with the scent of sage, the smoke curling slowly towards the stars. An old man sat at the center, eyes half closed, his voice low but clear as he spoke. "The dead don't go alone," he said. His words wove through the quiet like threads in a dark cloth. "There is always someone to meet them." Across the fire, a young boy listened, his knees drawn to his chest. He had never heard the stories told this late, never felt the weight of the old man's voice like this before. The night felt different. The wind shifted, brushing cold against his neck, but he didn't move. His grandmother sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the fire, hands resting gently on her knees. She hadn't spoken much that day. The boy knew why, but no one had explained it out loud. When the last breath leaves the body, the soul doesn't know where to go, the old man continued. That's when the spirit guide comes. The boy swallowed hard. His grandmother's hand brushed against his shoulder, light as a feather. "They say the guides wear many faces," the old man added. "Sometimes they come as birds. Sometimes wolves. Other times, someone you loved long ago." The boy thought of his grandfather's cane, still resting by the door even though no one used it. His grandmother kept it there, dusting it softly each week with careful hands. The fire cracked sharply, snapping him from his thoughts. The old man's gaze flickered to the edge of the circle, just beyond the light. "But the path isn't easy," he said. "Not for the living. Not for the dead." The boy's fingers dug into the dirt beside his feet. He had heard whispers before, about rivers you had to cross, bridges made of light and shadow, mountains that stretched endlessly beneath the earth. Places that only existed after the world you knew faded away. "Some souls lose their way," the old man said, his voice trailing softer. "The guide calls to them, but not everyone listens. Grief can keep them bound to this place." His grandmother's hand tightened briefly on his shoulder. The boy's eyes drifted to the far side of the fire where the shadows deepened. For a moment, he thought he saw something move, just beyond the edge of sight. The firelight didn't quite reach that far. "But no soul stays lost forever," the old man said gently, almost as if he had noticed the boy's gaze. "Even the wind carries them eventually." The boy felt his heart thump heavy against his ribs. His grandmother leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "Your grandfather isn't far," she whispered. The boy nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The fire crackled low, the embers glowing faintly like the last touch of daylight before night settled in full. The house sat quiet beneath the weight of night, but something stirred beyond the thin walls. A soft creak on the wooden floor. A brush of wind against the window pane. The kind of sounds that made the skin tighten across the back of the neck. She told herself it was just the house settling, just the wind. But deep down, she wasn't sure. Her grandmother used to say the dead speak when no one else is listening. "They don't knock loud," she'd said. "Just soft enough for the ones who need to hear." Tonight, the house felt full of voices she couldn't quite catch. In the corner of the room, the old clock ticked, heavy and slow. Its hands crawled past midnight, and the shadows around the room stretched longer, pressed in closer. She glanced at the chair by the window, empty except for the blanket draped carefully over it. The blanket still smelled faintly like her grandfather. "When they go, they leave threads behind," her grandmother had whispered once, knitting by the same window. "And sometimes, they tug them loose." The room grew colder, but she didn't move. There was a story her grandmother used to tell, late at night when the fire was low. It wasn't for the faint of heart. A story about a man who had ignored the call of the dead. He'd let the whispers slide past his ear like wind through the trees. The warnings had been soft, the footsteps faint. But the dead don't wait forever. One evening, he saw the shadow of his brother standing at the tree line. The brother who had drowned years before. The man froze, his breath catching sharp in his throat. The figure didn't speak, only stared with eyes dark as river stones. By the time the man stepped forward, the shadow had already slipped away. He followed anyway. Some warnings don't come twice, her grandmother had said, hands trembling as she folded the yarn. You listen the first time, or you don't listen at all. The house creaked again, louder this time. She sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. Her grandmother's voice echoed softly in her head. If they stand at your window, don't turn away. If they call your name, answer gently. The wind shifted outside, and the trees groaned under its weight. She remembered the night her grandmother passed. The house had been filled with relatives, their voices hushed but steady. But late, when everyone else slept, she had heard something else, just outside the window. A soft tapping, like fingertips against the glass. She'd pulled back the curtain to find nothing but the moon, hanging low and bright. But the air had felt different, like someone was there, but just out of reach. Now, she glanced at the window again. A faint shadow moved just beyond the glass. She didn't turn away. The dead don't come to frighten. They come to remind, to warn, to make sure the living remember. The wind carried a weight that night, heavy and sharp as the edge of a broken blade. It moved slowly through the cracks of the old house, curling around the doorframes, pressing against the thin glass of the windows. The fire had burned low, but no one stirred to stoke it. No one dared. Outside, the stars flickered, but something darker crouched between them, something watching. Her grandfather used to say the chindi never announced their arrival. They slip in with the wind, crawl beneath the eaves, and settle in the corners of a room like dust that no one notices until it's too late. The family had left the house empty after he passed. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The chindi weren't to be reasoned with. It wasn't the body that held danger when someone died, it was the air left behind. The breath that escaped their lips last. Her grandfather's voice had lowered every time he spoke of it, as if speaking too loudly might summon something that listened from the shadows. A piece of them lingers, he'd said, eyes dark under the rim of his hat. And not all pieces are good. The house had sat untouched for years, its door nailed shut, its windows boarded. The wind, though, found its way inside. One night, against the warnings of the elders, her cousin had dared to slip through the boards. It's just an empty house, he had whispered, laughing nervously. The dead are dead. But the air inside that house wasn't still. When he came out, his eyes looked different. His mother held him by the arm, shaking him gently, calling his name over and over. But he wouldn't answer. He just stood there, pale beneath the moonlight, his gaze fixed on something no one else could see. He never spoke about that night. But after that, he never laughed the same way again. Her grandmother used to smudge the doorways every season, waving the smoking bundle of sage in slow circles. You can't see them, she'd whisper. But they'll know when you do this. And they'll leave. She remembered the way the smoke would curl upwards, thick and white, sticking to the air like fog that refused to lift. Her grandmother never left a room without lingering by the corners, pressing the smoke deep into the spaces where shadows like to gather. Corners are where they stay the longest, she'd say. They don't like light. They don't like fire. But they like corners. Some nights, when the wind scraped against the side of the house, her grandmother would sit by the door with salt, sprinkling it across the threshold. If the chindi comes knocking, they won't cross this, she'd whisper, and the grains of salt would glisten faintly in the dim light. But the chindi didn't always knock. There was a story about a man from the village, long before her time, who had lived alone after his father died. He never smudged the house. Never left offerings or burned sweetgrass. One evening, neighbors said they heard him talking to someone who wasn't there. His voice floated softly from his window, steady but strange, as if answering questions in the empty air. In the morning, they found him sitting in the doorway, his eyes glassy, his skin cold. His footprints circled the house, but none led away. The elders said the chindi had followed him from the inside out. Her grandfather never told that story without keeping the fire lit long after everyone had gone to sleep. When he passed, they didn't speak his name for weeks. Not because they had forgotten him, but because the Chindi latch onto names, her grandmother had said. Call the dead too soon, and the wrong part might answer. The family had gathered silently by the mesa, lowering him into the earth with the sun sinking behind the mountains. No one spoke. Not until the last stone had been placed, and the light had slipped below the horizon. Only then did they whisper his name, once, soft and quick. And then they let the wind carry it away. She remembered standing there as the shadows stretched long across the sand, watching the last sliver of sun vanish. It wasn't sadness that weighed on her shoulders that day. It was the silence that followed. The wind was quiet the day he passed, but she could still hear it in the distance, weaving through the dry branches like someone humming low under their breath. The sun had begun its slow descent, bleeding gold across the sky, and the world felt stretched thin, like something unseen had stepped closer. Her grandmother once said that the line between this world and the next is not thick. It's as thin as a single thread, fraying in places, and sometimes the dead walk near enough to be heard. If you listen carefully, she'd whispered, you might catch the echo of their footsteps. The village fell into silence after the burial, but she couldn't stop wondering where he had gone. Where does the path lead once the last breath leaves the body? Some say the spirits rise with the smoke, carried on the wind to a place where the stars drift close enough to touch. Others believe the dead cross rivers, their shadows flickering along the banks as the water swirls beneath them. There are those who speak of vast plains, where the grass bends and waves beneath the feet of those long gone, and the sky stretches endlessly overhead, untouched by storms. But her grandfather used to speak of something different, something quieter. He would sit by the fire at night, the light flickering across his face, and tell her that the land of the dead isn't far. It's not somewhere distant or unreachable. It's just behind that hill, he'd say, nodding toward the dark horizon. Or beneath the roots of that tree. We walk near it every day. He once told her about the time he felt it most. It was after his brother passed, and the nights felt too long, pressing down on him like a weight. One evening, as he sat outside watching the stars blink awake, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, familiar. I didn't turn around, he said. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew if I did, he'd be gone. The footsteps stopped just beside him, and the air grew heavy, thick with something more than night. He didn't speak, but I knew he was there. And when the wind passed through the trees, I felt lighter. Like he had said everything he needed to without words. She thought of that story often after her grandfather was buried. Some nights, she sat by the fire, watching the flames dance, waiting for footsteps that never came. But the wind would hum softly through the branches, and in those moments, she felt the weight lift, just a little. The elders say the land of the dead has many roads, and no two spirits walk the same path. Some follow trails marked by the bones of ancestors, their way lit by the soft glow of lanterns that never flicker. Others walk beneath endless canopies, where the trees whisper their names, calling them forward. But not all spirits leave quickly, her grandmother once told her. Some linger. They stay close, trailing the living like shadows. Not because they're lost, but because they are waiting for the right word, the right prayer, or perhaps just the right silence. She remembered the story of the woman from the next village, whose husband never left after he died. The woman swore she saw him in the fields at dusk, his silhouette standing tall against the fading light. I left his supper out by the door every night, the woman had said, her voice trembling. And by morning, it was gone. The elders warned against feeding the dead. They'll stay too long if you do, they said. And the longer they stay, the harder it is for them to cross. But the woman didn't stop. It wasn't until the first frost dusted the ground that she finally found peace. One morning, she woke to see footprints leading away from her door, pressed deep into the snow. They disappeared at the edge of the woods, swallowed by the trees. He was ready, the woman whispered, her eyes soft. And I was ready to let him go. Her grandmother believed the dead sometimes return as birds. Watch closely, she said, brushing her hair back gently one evening. If a bird lingers by your window, it might be someone you love, coming to check on you. A red bird perched outside her window the day after her grandfather's burial. It stayed there for hours, tilting its head as if listening. When the sun dipped low, it took off without a sound, and she felt the weight ease, just a little more. Some say the land of the dead is lit by an eternal fire, burning softly at the center of the world, warming the hands of those who gather near it. Others believe it's filled with rivers that shimmer under endless moonlight, carrying spirits gently across to the other side. But her grandfather's words stayed with her the longest. It's not far, he'd said, smiling faintly. It's just behind that hill. Closer than you think. The howl broke through the night like a thread pulled tight, echoing against the dark trees. It wasn't lonely. It wasn't mournful. It was something stronger, something older. A call that carried across the hills, stitching the world together for a brief moment. She stopped walking, breath catching in her throat. The snow beneath her feet crunched softly, but even that sound felt distant now. The wind stilled. The trees stood taller. Everything listened. Her grandfather once told her that wolves don't just live in the forest, they are the heart of it. Their eyes hold the wild, he'd said, staring into the fire one evening. And when they look at you, they see everything. The parts you hide. The parts you've forgotten. They know. She never forgot those words. The howl faded, but she stayed still, as if moving would break something delicate hanging in the air. She scanned the tree line, half expecting to see glowing eyes watching from the shadows. There was nothing. But she felt it. Wolves aren't just hunters. They are watchers. Guardians. The old story said that when someone was lost, truly lost, not just wandering, the wolf spirit would follow them. Sometimes as a shape on the ridge, a flicker of movement between the trees. Other times as breath on the wind, just behind their shoulder. A reminder that they were not alone. Her father used to tell the story of the hunter who went too far into the mountains. Snow fell fast, covering the trails, and the man couldn't find his way back. For 3 days, he wandered through the woods, his footsteps growing weaker. On the 4th day, he collapsed beneath a pine tree, too cold to move. That night, the wolves came. They didn't attack. They circled him, their eyes flickering in the firelight of the small flame he had left. When morning came, the hunter woke to see a single wolf standing at the edge of the clearing, staring at him. Slowly, the wolf turned and walked away. The hunter followed. The wolf led him down narrow paths, through snow so thick it swallowed his legs, until finally the trees parted and he saw the edge of his village. He turned to thank the wolf, but there was nothing there, just the empty forest, quiet and still. The wolf doesn't ask for thanks, her father had said. It doesn't need it. She thought of that now as she walked home, the silence of the woods pressing in around her. Somewhere out there, she knew the wolves were watching. Not near. But not far. Her grandmother believed wolves carried the souls of warriors. They stay with their pack even after death, she'd whispered on cold winter nights. Guiding them, protecting them. The stars overhead blinked softly, scattered like footprints across the sky. She remembered the first time she saw a wolf. She was a child, no older than 7, following her grandfather to gather wood. It stood at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by the tall grass. Its fur was a patchwork of silver and black, blending with the shadows. Her grandfather raised his hand slightly. "Don't move," he said, voice calm but firm. The wolf didn't growl. It didn't bare its teeth. It simply stared, its amber eyes catching the fading light. For a moment, she felt as though the wolf saw through her, as if it knew more about her than she knew herself. Then, just as silently as it appeared, the wolf turned and slipped back into the woods. She looked up at her grandfather, wide-eyed and breathless. He only smiled. "They're stronger than we are," he said. "Not because they're bigger, but because they understand things we don't." Strength wasn't about power. It wasn't about who could run faster or fight harder. It was about loyalty. The kind that never wavered. The kind that held when everything else crumbled. That's what the wolf spirit was. A protector. A reminder. She thought about the hunters who wore wolf pelts into battle, not as trophies, but as signs of respect. They believed the spirit of the wolf stayed with them, guiding their hands, sharpening their senses. To wear the skin of a wolf was not to conquer it. It was to carry its strength. The elders spoke of the bond between wolves and those who walked closely with the land. The connection was not one of dominance. It was mutual respect. Wolves teach us how to survive, they said. They show us the value of family. The importance of standing together. In the stories, when a wolf howled, it was calling not just to its pack, but to the spirits beyond, the ancestors who watched from the other side. She wondered if that was what she heard tonight. A call not for the living, but for those who had already crossed. A reminder that even in the stillness, nothing is truly gone. The wind picked up again, threading softly through the trees. And for just a moment, she thought she saw something move in the distance. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. Something stronger. The heavy rustle of leaves echoed through the forest, as though the earth itself was sighing. It was early morning, and the light of the rising sun filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows on the ground. The air was crisp, cool enough to bite at the skin, but comforting in its stillness. And yet, the silence was heavy, like something ancient was watching from the shadows. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind, "The bear spirit is always near. You may not see it, but it is there, in the quiet." She stopped, letting the woods surround her. A chill ran down her spine, but not from fear. No, it was something else, a reminder that something profound was stirring in the forest. The bear was close. She could feel it, even though it wasn't there. Not in sight, but in spirit. Always watching, always waiting. It was as if the earth itself breathed through the bear, and the weight of that power stretched through the ground, into her bones. The bear spirit was not just strength. It was not just the raw power of a creature built to survive. It was something more, something older. Something wise. She thought of the elders and the way they spoke of the bear. They did not just see it as a powerful animal. The bear was a healer, a teacher. It would retreat into the shadows during the cold months, hibernating not only to rest, but to reflect. To heal. To look inward. There was so much to learn from the bear if you knew how to listen. Grandfather used to tell stories of those who wandered the forest with broken spirits, weighed down by pain or loss. It was always the bear who would come to them. Quiet. Stealthy. Sometimes, just in a dream, a vision in the night, where the bear would offer guidance, showing the way forward with a gaze that felt almost like a touch. And sometimes, the bear would come in the day, standing in the clearing, not moving, just watching. Watching until the brokenness in the heart began to mend. The bear's power was not in its brute force, but in its stillness. In its ability to retreat, to step back and listen to the whispers of the earth. It could teach the greatest warriors the value of quiet strength. In a world that rushed, that shouted for attention, the bear showed that true power often came from knowing when to pause. A soft thud from the wood startled her, and she turned instinctively toward the sound. Was it a bear? No. Just a branch falling, nothing more. But her heartbeat was quickening. She wasn't sure if it was excitement or something deeper, something instinctual, like a small spark inside her, waiting to ignite. Her grandfather had been ill when he'd last told her of the bear's teachings. In the time he spent sick in his bed, he spoke often of his dreams, of the bear's visitations. The way the bear would silently sit beside him in those dreams, its eyes full of a knowing calm, as if asking him to see what he could not in waking life. In one of those dreams, the bear had gently pressed its nose to his chest. It wasn't a forceful gesture. No, it was a soft, healing touch. Her grandfather had awakened with tears in his eyes, a deep, unexplainable peace within him. It was then that he told her, the bear teaches us to reflect. To heal ourselves, so we can be strong for others. The way he spoke was different that day, calm, settled, ready to let go. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of him, thinking of how he'd smiled before he passed. That same peace had come to him in the end, just like the bear had shown him. The bear, though physically immense, was a spirit of gentleness. Those who followed its path knew it was not enough to simply be strong in body. Strength of heart was just as essential, perhaps more so. Strength of the mind, the soul. The ability to stand firm in the face of adversity, and yet remain humble enough to know when to retreat and heal. She could feel it now, the presence of the bear spirit in the trees, and the earth beneath her feet. She remembered the moment she first understood the bear's lesson. It had been a difficult time in her life, one of sadness and uncertainty. It was as if the weight of everything had buried her, and she could not see the way out. That was when she'd gone to the forest, searching for answers, searching for a way to heal. In the silence of the woods, the bear had appeared, not in form, but in feeling. There, in the stillness of the forest, she had found herself. The quiet had taken away her fears. It had shown her the power of letting go. She had sat there, in the heart of the woods, for hours, feeling the weight of the world lift from her shoulders, piece by piece. It was the bear who had led her to herself. Not through force, but through patience and the promise of healing. Now, as she stood in the same woods, she knew that the bear had never truly left. It was a part of her, just as it was a part of everyone. The wisdom of the bear ran deep, in ways that only the quietest of souls could hear. The bear spirit was a reminder that to truly heal, you must first look within. A soft breeze stirred the leaves again, and for just a moment, she felt as though the bear had passed by her, brushing against her spirit. The touch was gentle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. She smiled, knowing that the bear was always near, watching, guiding, waiting for those who were ready to listen. As she continued on her path, the forest felt different, alive with the energy of the bear spirit. She was not alone. The bear was with her. It always had been. The sky was a pale canvas, stretching far beyond the horizon, and in that endless blue, something stirred. The beat of wings echoed through the air, each powerful stroke sending ripples across the clouds. High above, the eagle soared, its gaze steady, unblinking. It was more than a bird, more than just a creature of flight. It was something ancient, a messenger of a world far beyond the earthly realm. As the eagle banked sharply, its sharp eyes surveyed the land below. It saw more than just the trees, the rivers, the mountains. It saw the heartbeat of the world, the pulse of life that connected everything. With every beat of its wings, the eagle carried with it the wisdom of ages, its spirit a bridge between the heavens and the earth. And those who were fortunate enough to feel its presence understood, this was no ordinary creature. This was a vision, a divine messenger whose very flight carried meaning, purpose, and understanding. The elders spoke of the eagle spirit often, in hushed voices, with reverence in their eyes. The eagle was a messenger of the divine. It was the one who could ascend to the highest heights, beyond the reach of mere mortals, to bring back visions, guidance, and insight from the great unknown. It was said that when the eagle appeared, it wasn't by chance. It was a sign, a call to look beyond the surface, to seek a higher understanding of the world around them. To see through the eagle's eyes was to see the world as it truly was, whole, interconnected, and infinite. There was a time when a young man stood at the edge of a cliff, his heart weighed down by doubt, his mind clouded by uncertainty. Life had pushed him to the edge, leaving him feeling lost, unsure of his path. The world around him seemed vast and unyielding, its challenges too great to overcome. And in that moment, when the wind howled and the world seemed to close in around him, the eagle appeared. At first, it was nothing more than a dot in the sky, but as it grew closer, the young man could feel the air shift, a sense of something divine descending. The eagle circled above him, its wings cutting through the air with a grace that left him breathless. The sound of its wings was like the beat of his own heart, a rhythm that pulsed in time with his own breath. And then, as the eagle soared higher, the young man felt something deep within him stir, something he had long forgotten, something he had buried beneath layers of fear and doubt. The eagle's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the world fell away. It wasn't just a bird flying above him, it was a vision, a revelation, a connection to something far greater than himself. The eagle's gaze was steady, unwavering, and in it, the young man saw his true self. He saw the strength that lay within him, the power to rise above the trials of life, to soar as the eagle did. The message was clear: you are not lost. You are simply waiting for your wings to carry you. The eagle, messenger of the divine, had come to show him the way. It was a call to trust, to have faith that there was more to life than what met the eye. The path was not always clear, but the eagle's flight reminded him that sometimes the greatest journeys began with the leap into the unknown. As the eagle disappeared into the distance, the young man was left standing on the cliff, but he was no longer the same. Something had shifted within him. He had seen the world through the eagle's eyes, and the world was not as it had seemed before. It was vast, yes, but it was also full of possibility. There was beauty in the uncertainty, strength in the struggle. The eagle had shown him that the divine was not some far-off entity, but something that lived within him, within all of us. The eagle's spirit lived on in every wind that blew, and every moment of clarity that pierced through the fog of confusion. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, there was always a higher purpose. The eagle taught that vision came not from the eyes, but from the soul. It was in the quiet moments of reflection, the stillness of the heart, that true sight was granted. And the world, once a blur of confusion, became clear and sharp, like the eagle's flight. For years after that day, the young man carried the eagle's lesson with him. Whenever the winds grew strong and the road ahead seemed unclear, he would think of the eagle, of its steady wings cutting through the sky, of its unwavering vision. He had learned that the divine did not always speak in loud voices, but in whispers, in moments of quiet revelation. And sometimes, those moments came in the form of a bird soaring high above, a sign that the journey was not over, that there was more to see, more to understand. The eagle spirit did not just guide in moments of doubt. It also came in times of triumph, reminding those who carried its vision to stay grounded, to remember the earth even as they soared. The eagle's spirit was a reminder that while the sky was vast and full of potential, the roots of the earth were just as important. It was the balance between the two, between the divine and the earthly, that gave life meaning. To rise as the eagle did was to honor both the heavens and the earth, to see the world as a whole, interconnected in a beautiful, intricate dance. The eagle's message was simple: see beyond what is visible. Trust in the path that lies ahead, even when it is unclear. And always, always, remember to soar. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, the eagle appeared once more on the horizon, its silhouette a symbol of strength, of vision, of divine connection. It flew high, higher than anything else, its wings cutting through the air like a song. The world below, vast and full of life, seemed to pause in reverence, as though the eagle was the messenger of all that was sacred and true. And for a moment, the young man remembered. The eagle was still with him, its spirit always watching, guiding, waiting for the next moment when it would call him to rise once again. There are stories that echo through the ages, passed down by elders, whispered under the canopy of trees, and carried by the winds. One such story is that of the turtle, the earth-bearer, whose slow, deliberate steps shaped the world as we know it. It is a story of strength and patience, of creation and rebirth, and of the quiet power that can carry the weight of the earth itself. In the beginning, before the land was solid, before the rivers carved their paths and the trees stretched toward the sky, there was nothing but water. The sky was dark, the stars barely visible, and the world was an endless ocean. There was no firm ground, no place for life to grow, just a vast, empty expanse of water. And in the midst of this endless sea, there was a turtle, floating gently, moving with the rhythm of the water, patient and calm. The turtle had been there for an eternity, a quiet, steadfast creature. But one day, it was called upon. A great force, a divine will, stirred in the depths of the water. From the heavens above and the depths below, a voice spoke. It was not loud or harsh, but a soft, powerful whisper that carried with it the weight of the entire universe. The turtle was chosen, and with its slow, deliberate movements, it would become the foundation of the world. The great turtle rose from the water, carrying with it the earth that would become the land. Slowly, methodically, it swam to the surface, its massive shell breaking the surface of the water, the first sign of land to ever touch the sky. The water rippled and parted around it as the turtle's powerful limbs moved beneath the surface, pushing the weight of the earth forward. The turtle's shell, once smooth and unmarked, began to bear the weight of the world, and in time, life would spring forth from its back. There was no rush. There was no haste. The turtle's steps were slow and steady, each one a movement toward creation. It was in these moments that the world began to take shape. As the turtle moved, plants began to grow on its back. The first shoots of grass, the tender roots of trees, all began to take hold of the earth that the turtle carried. The turtle's body became a sacred space, a home for life, a place where all things could take root and begin to flourish. The slow, steady nature of the turtle's journey was mirrored in the way the world itself began to grow. The earth was shaped, the mountains rose from the deep, and the rivers carved their paths, flowing from the turtle's shell into the seas. The land that the turtle bore was not merely earth and stone, but the beginning of everything, the first home for all living things, a place where creation would begin. As the turtle moved, it carried not only the earth, but also the stories of the world. The slow movement of the turtle was reflected in the rhythms of the earth itself, the turning of the seasons, the ebb and flow of the tides, the rise and fall of mountains. Everything had a time, a place, and a pace. The turtle knew this better than anyone. Its patient journey was the heartbeat of the world, its steps the foundation of life itself. And yet, for all its strength, the turtle was gentle. The world it carried was not heavy to it, for the turtle understood something that many would come to learn in time: strength was not always about force. Sometimes, true strength came in patience, and quiet endurance, and carrying the weight of the world without rushing. The turtle moved slowly, but its movements were sure, unshaken by the waves that might threaten to knock it off course. There were moments of stillness, moments when the turtle rested in the calm waters, its great shell floating like an island of peace in the vast ocean. It was in these moments that the turtle reflected on its journey, on the earth it carried, and the life that had begun to take shape. The air was thick with the promise of life, the gentle hum of the earth's pulse. But the turtle's journey was not without its challenges. There were times when the waves would rise high, when the waters would churn and threaten to swallow the turtle whole. Yet, even in the face of such turmoil, the turtle's strength never wavered. It had carried the earth through storm and calm, through darkness and light. It had seen the world form from nothing, and now it saw life begin to flourish in ways it had never imagined. There was a sense of reverence that surrounded the turtle, for it was not just an animal, it was the very embodiment of life, of creation, of the earth itself. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the quietest, slowest moments, something incredible was happening. Life was being created, the world was being born, and the turtle was at the center of it all. In the stories told around the fire, the turtle was honored. It was a symbol of endurance, of quiet wisdom, and of the importance of the earth. The turtle did not speak loudly, but its actions carried more meaning than any words could express. It carried the weight of the world, both literally and symbolically, and in doing so, it gave life to all who walked upon it. Generations passed, and the turtle's journey continued. The land that it carried grew vast and beautiful, filled with forests, deserts, mountains, and oceans. Life thrived upon its back, from the smallest insect to the largest creature. And the turtle, though ancient and wise, continued to bear the earth with the same quiet grace it had always known. It was a reminder that, no matter how small one might seem, no matter how slow or patient one might be, they were still capable of carrying great things. The turtle's story is not just one of creation. It is a story of quiet strength, of perseverance, of the beauty of taking things one step at a time. In a world that often rushes, that demands quick results and immediate rewards, the turtle teaches us to slow down, to appreciate the world beneath our feet, and to understand that sometimes, the greatest things take time to grow. And so, the turtle remains, carrying the earth upon its back, as it always has and always will. With every movement, it shapes the world, its steady, sure steps echoing through the ages, a testament to the power of patience, the strength of endurance, and the creation of life itself. The turtle is not just a creature of the earth, it is the earth, a living symbol of the foundation that holds all things together, steady and unyielding, through every season of change. There is a place by the river, where the water moves with an endless rhythm, a quiet murmur that echoes the stories of ancient spirits. Here, the otters play, tumbling and sliding on the banks, their small bodies quick and graceful in the water. It's a place where the world seems to slow down, where time itself takes a back seat to the simple joy of being. The otter's spirit is alive in every splash, and every roll of the water as it dances with the current. The air is filled with the sound of laughter, not in words, but in the way these creatures live, playful, free, and without hesitation. Otters are the embodiment of joy, but they are also symbols of something deeper, something rooted in the very essence of life itself. Their playful nature teaches that laughter is an essential part of survival. Even in the harshest of conditions, the otter finds time to play. It is a reminder that life, in all its struggles, can still be beautiful. That sometimes, in the darkest moments, a spark of joy can light the way, helping us to persevere, to find strength in the simplest of moments. As the otters play in the water, there is another spirit that moves through the river, a spirit that works tirelessly, unyielding, with purpose. The beaver. The beaver is a builder, a creator. It is known for its unshakable perseverance, its relentless drive to create something from nothing. The beaver's spirit is one of resourcefulness, an embodiment of the ability to see potential where others may not. It is not about the size of the task, but the heart to see it through, to keep building, no matter the obstacles. The beaver's dam is not built in a day, and the beaver knows this. It works, day by day, gathering branches and twigs, cutting and placing, until the structure begins to take shape. There is no rush, no urgency, just the quiet rhythm of work, the steady beat of purpose. The beaver's spirit teaches us the value of perseverance, of continuing even when the end seems far away. It shows us that the work we put in, no matter how small or slow, builds something lasting, something important. And it teaches us that the world we build is often a reflection of our patience, our dedication, and our ability to keep going, no matter how many times the current tries to wash it away. Together, the otter and the beaver spirit stand as opposites yet complements. One is the spirit of joy, laughter, and lightness, the other is the spirit of strength, hard work, and endurance. Yet both show us how life can be lived fully, how we can find balance in play and work, and laughter and perseverance. The otter's joy reminds us to take time to play, to embrace the lighthearted moments that keep us connected to the world around us. The beaver's persistence calls us to work with purpose, to build something that will stand the test of time, something that will give back to the world, just as the beaver gives back to the rivers with its dam. In the quiet of the early morning, when the fog clings to the surface of the water and the world is still waking up, you might see the otter and the beaver side by side. The otter, playful and free, dances on the river's edge, while the beaver works tirelessly, crafting its dam with precision and care. The water flows around them, uninterrupted, a reminder that life moves forward, no matter how much we laugh or work. But there is more to the story than just the playful otter or the hard-working beaver. There is a lesson hidden in their spirits. The otter, with its joy and abandon, shows us the importance of finding moments of lightness. It's easy to get caught up in the weight of life and the struggles that seem endless. But the otter calls us to remember that there is beauty in simplicity, that in the quiet moments of joy, we find the energy to keep moving forward. And then there is the beaver, whose work is never done, who tirelessly shapes the world with its dam. The beaver calls us to act, to take the lessons we've learned and use them to create something meaningful. It's not just about what we build, but about how we build it. The beaver doesn't work for the sake of working, it works because it knows the value of what it is creating. The beaver teaches us that perseverance is not just about pushing through, but about building with purpose, about creating something that will stand the test of time. When the sun sets and the stars begin to twinkle above, the otter and the beaver are both reflections of something larger than themselves. The otter brings joy to the river, the beaver brings structure, but together, they embody the flow of life. They show us that we are more than just one thing. We are both the play and the work, the lightness and the strength, the joy and the perseverance. It is in the balance between these things that we find our truest selves. In the dance of the otter and the steady work of the beaver, there is a story of life, how it moves, how it challenges us, and how it rewards us. Both creatures understand something vital. Life is a mixture of lightness and weight, joy and effort, play and perseverance. It's about finding the strength to laugh in the face of hardship and the courage to keep building, even when the world seems to tear it all down. And when the sun dips below the horizon, leaving behind the soft, golden light of the evening, you can almost hear the quiet laughter of the otter and the steady rhythm of the beaver's work. They are symbols of the balance we seek in life, of finding time for joy, and of knowing that no matter how long it takes, what we build will always be worth it. Through their spirits, we learn that life isn't just about what we do, but how we do it, and that in every playful moment, and in every hard-working step, there is a deeper meaning waiting to be discovered. The fire crackles in the center of the circle, its warm light flickering against the deep shadows that surround it. The scent of herbs fills the air, mingling with the earthy fragrance of the forest, grounding the moment in time. The shaman stands tall, their eyes closed, their face peaceful yet focused. In the stillness of the night, there is a sense of something beyond, something unseen, whispering in the very fabric of the world. The world of spirits is just a breath away, and the shaman, the mediator, the bridge between two realms, prepares to listen. A drumbeat fills the air, slow and steady, echoing through the trees. With each thud, it seems to call out to something far off, calling the spirits to draw near. The shaman raises their arms, reaching towards the sky, connecting the earth below with the heavens above. They are not just standing there, they are becoming something more, a vessel for the energies of the universe, a conduit between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. In that moment, the air grows heavier, and the energy around them pulses like the heartbeat of the earth itself. In many cultures, the shaman is more than a healer. They are the keeper of ancient knowledge, the one who has been chosen to speak with spirits, to enter the world beyond our understanding. They are intermediaries, a lifeline between the seen world and the unseen forces that govern it. People come to them with their pain, their questions, their fears, seeking answers that lie beyond the reach of ordinary perception. The shaman listens, understands, and carries those words into the spirit world, where the unseen ancestors and guardians wait, ready to offer their wisdom. It is a sacred role, one that carries weight beyond imagination. A medicine man or woman is not merely a person with knowledge of plants and healing arts, they are a keeper of the spirit's language, someone who understands that the physical world is only one part of the great dance of existence. They know that the spirits of the earth, the ancestors, and the unseen forces of the universe speak in subtle ways, and it is their job to interpret those messages. Through trance, through ritual, through the use of sacred herbs, and even through the beating of a drum, the shaman enters a space where time and space blur. It is in this space that they find the answers, the guidance, the healing that others so desperately need. To witness a shaman at work is to see someone caught between two worlds. Their body may be still, but their soul is traveling, moving through places that can only be imagined. It is not easy work. The spirits are not always kind or gentle, and the messages they bring are not always clear. There are times when the spirits are restless, when the wind howls through the trees, and the night seems full of voices that cannot be understood. In those moments, the shaman must trust, must listen with every part of their being, letting the energy of the world flow through them and guide them to the truth. The shaman's work is never about their own power, it is always about the power of the spirits that guide them. They are humble servants, trusting in the wisdom that flows through them. They do not claim to know everything. Instead, they acknowledge that they are part of something much larger than themselves. Their role is to serve, to bring messages from the other side, to share what they have learned, and to help others find the healing they seek. The shaman is not a god, but a messenger, a listener who speaks the language of the spirit world in ways that others can understand. For the people who seek the shaman's help, it is often a matter of life and death. There are those who come with broken hearts, wounded souls, or physical ailments that no doctor can cure. The shaman listens to their pain, to their suffering, and enters the spirit world to ask for answers. Sometimes, the answers come quickly, a vision, a whisper, a sign. Other times, the spirits are more elusive, and the shaman must wait, listen, and trust that in time, the guidance will come. It is said that a shaman's power lies in their ability to walk between worlds. They are both of this earth and beyond it, existing in a space that is as close to the spirit realm as it is to our own. And when they are called upon, they step into that space fully, with no fear, no hesitation. It is a life of service, one that requires courage and conviction, for the shaman knows that they are not only working for the living but for those who have passed on as well. The spirits speak to them, not as a mere curiosity, but as a deep responsibility, a charge that must be fulfilled with honor and respect. In every culture, the shaman is seen as someone who has a direct connection to the unseen forces that shape the world. They are the ones who can interpret dreams, who can sense energies that others cannot see, who can bridge the gap between the living and the dead. They are the ones who stand at the edge of the known world, gazing into the unknown, and they are willing to go where others fear to tread. It is not a job for the faint of heart, it is a calling, one that requires a deep understanding of the universe's mysteries and the courage to face them. The shaman's role is sacred, but it is also fragile. The spirits are not always kind, and the messages they bring can be difficult to bear. It is said that a true shaman must be able to endure the hardships of the spirit world, to face the challenges and dangers that come with walking in both worlds. It is a lonely path, one that requires sacrifice, for the shaman is often separated from their community, standing as a bridge between the living and the dead. But it is also a rewarding path, for the shaman is the one who can bring peace to the troubled soul, guidance to the lost, and healing to the wounded. As the fire burns low and the drumbeat fades, the shaman returns from their trance. Their faces serene, their eyes filled with the wisdom of the spirits. They have heard the messages, felt the energies, and brought back what was needed. The air is still, and for a moment, the world seems to hold its breath, waiting for the shaman's words. With quiet authority, they speak the message of the spirits, offering healing, guidance, or warnings to those gathered around. It is not the shaman who holds the power, it is the spirits, the ancestors, the unseen forces that guide them. The shaman is simply the vessel, the one who listens, the one who carries the message from the other side. And in that moment, as the words are spoken, the power of the spirit world is real, tangible, and alive, filling the space with a quiet understanding that all things are connected, that life and death are part of a larger cycle, and that the shaman, standing between two worlds, has brought a piece of that wisdom back to those who seek it. The air is thick with the scent of pine, the faintest trace of sage, and the promise of something more. The sky overhead stretches endlessly, an expanse of blue where nothing can hide. Beneath the vastness, a lone figure stands at the edge of the world, at the very edge of the known. With each breath, they draw in the spirit of the earth, the quiet hum of the wind, and the heavy stillness of a journey that lies ahead. The silence is louder than any sound, and in it, the beating of their heart is all they can hear. This is the beginning of something sacred. The quest for truth, for clarity, for connection with the unseen world. They are about to step into the unknown, to walk into the very heart of their soul, where the spirits await. It's not a journey through the physical world, it's a journey through the deepest parts of who they are, where the answers they seek live, hidden within. The vision quest is not a simple pilgrimage, it's a sacred, deeply personal moment that only the brave undertake. It is a time when the veil between the living and the spirit world thins, and those who walk this path are granted the rare opportunity to ask questions, seek guidance, and receive answers. Alone in the wilderness, with nothing but the sky, the earth, and their own breath, they are stripped of all distractions, forced to confront the truths that lie beneath their surface. It is a time to understand who they are, where they have been, and where they are going. The fire crackles softly in the distance as the figure settles on the ground, eyes closed, facing the open sky. The world around them is alive with the sounds of nature, an eagle's cry, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the far-off sound of a stream trickling over rocks. But in this moment, all of that fades away. They are no longer just a person standing in the wilderness. They have become part of it. They are the sky, the trees, the earth beneath them, and the heartbeat of the world itself. As the sun begins to sink, a strange peace washes over them, as though the weight of the world has lifted. This is the time when the journey begins, not on their feet, but within. Then it starts, the visions. At first, it is just a blur, a flicker at the edge of their consciousness. But soon, the shapes begin to take form, the spirits begin to appear. They come in the form of animals, of ancestors, of forces too old and powerful for the mind to fully grasp. Each figure is a messenger, each one offering a glimpse into the greater mysteries of the universe. The figure doesn't speak with words, their message is carried in the deep, primal energy of their being. A wolf approaches, and the figure feels its loyalty, its wisdom. The eagle circles overhead, and they feel its vision, its far-seeing clarity. The bear appears from the shadows, offering the strength to face the hardest parts of themselves. The visions are not always gentle. The spirits are not always kind. Sometimes, they are forces of nature, forces of change, of transformation, coming to test the seeker's resolve. The figure feels the chill of fear as the thunder rumbles in the distance, as the shadows of unseen dangers press in. But in that fear, there is also something else, a call to surrender, to trust, to let go of everything that has held them back. It is not a test of strength, it is a test of the soul. Hours stretch into days, and the seeker is alone with their thoughts, their doubts, their prayers. Their body grows weary, their mind begins to wander. But the vision quest is not about physical endurance, it's about reaching into the core of who they are. They are asking for something much deeper than answers. They are asking for clarity, for the strength to carry their truth back with them into the world. In the stillness, their senses heighten. Every leaf, every sound, every breath feels like a message. The spirits are speaking, and the figure must listen. Each vision is a puzzle piece, each animal, each ancestor, a key to unlocking the mysteries within. The wolves whisper of loyalty, the bear of introspection, the eagle of vision. They are guides, offering wisdom in ways that words cannot describe. They are not telling the seeker what to do. They are showing them who they truly are, who they have always been beneath the surface of doubt, beneath the layers of fear. The pain of self-discovery is not an easy one. The spirits do not spare the seeker from facing their darkest corners. But in the discomfort, there is also growth. Each revelation, each vision, is a step closer to understanding. The road is not easy, but it is necessary. This is not a quest for escape, but a quest for truth, a truth that can only be found by shedding the layers of illusion and stepping into the raw reality of who the seeker is. As the sun rises again, a new clarity emerges. The seeker has not returned from the wilderness the same person who entered it. They have changed, reshaped by the visions they've witnessed, the messages they've received. The animals, the spirits, the forces that once seemed distant now feel like part of them, a part of their very soul. They understand now, in ways that words cannot explain, what it means to walk in balance with the earth, with the spirits, with themselves. When the quest ends, the world is the same. The trees still stand, the sky still stretches above, and the wind still whispers. But for the seeker, everything is different. They have seen the hidden patterns of the world, the way everything is interconnected, and they now carry that knowledge inside them. The spirits have spoken, and the seeker has listened. What they have learned is not something that can be told to others, it is a sacred truth, held in the heart, to be lived, not explained. The vision quest is a journey not to find something new, but to discover what has always been there, waiting just beneath the surface. The seeker comes not to change their path, but to find the strength and understanding to walk it with clarity, with vision, with connection to the spirits that guide them. The answers are not always clear, but the journey is always worth it. It is the ultimate test of the soul, the ultimate reminder that the answers to life's most profound questions are already within us, waiting for us to listen. The drums beat. Slow at first, then faster, until their rhythm fills the air, thumping through the ground, vibrating through the bones of those gathered. The sound is primal, ancient, as if the heartbeat of the earth itself is being summoned. The dance begins, feet pounding on the dirt, bodies swaying in a trance, lost to the rhythm. Each movement, each step, is a prayer, a plea to the spirits, a call to the divine. It is the sun dance, a sacred ritual that marks the passage of time, the changing of seasons, the eternal cycle of life and death. For the dancers, it is a sacred act of sacrifice and devotion. Their bodies move in sync with the heartbeat of the earth, their souls reaching out to the spirits that walk beside them, unseen but ever present. The sun rises high in the sky, its light pouring down on the dancers, casting long shadows across the earth. The heat is intense, but the dancers continue, their limbs heavy, their hearts full of reverence. The sun is not just a celestial body, it is a power that connects all things, a symbol of life itself. With every twist, every turn, the dancers honor the Creator, asking for strength, for guidance, for healing. Some of the dancers are young, full of hope and energy, while others are elders, their faces lined with the wisdom of the years. But in this moment, all are equal, bound together by the spirit of the dance. The sun shines brighter, the drumming grows louder, and the spirits move closer, answering the call. The heat becomes almost unbearable, and yet, they continue. It is not just the body that is tested, but the spirit. The pain in their muscles, the sweat pouring from their brows, all of it is offered as a sacrifice. There are no words, only the movement, the rhythm, the connection. In this sacred dance, the dancers step outside themselves, becoming vessels for something greater, something divine. They are no longer separate from the earth, from the spirits, from the sun. They are one with it all. But the sun dance is not the only ceremony that calls the spirits. As the drums slow, and the dancers begin to rest, another dance begins, a different rhythm, a different energy, yet still the same sacred connection. This is the ghost dance, a dance of hope, a dance of remembrance. It is a dance that honors the dead, that calls upon the spirits of ancestors who have crossed over. The beat of the drum echoes the sound of the heartbeat of the earth, but now, it is softer, more mournful. The spirits of the departed are not far away, they are in the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the flickering of the firelight. They are everywhere. The ghost dance is a prayer for the return of those who have passed, a plea for healing, for restoration, for justice. It is a dance that remembers the struggles of the people, the pain of loss, but also the hope that those struggles will not be in vain. The dancers move in a slow, almost hypnotic way, their feet tracing patterns in the dirt, their hands raised to the heavens. They are not asking for something new, they are asking for the spirits of the past to return, to guide them, to bring peace. As the night falls and the firelight flickers, the dance grows more intense, the drumming more frantic. It is as if the spirits are drawing nearer, responding to the call. The dancers' bodies are no longer just human, they have become vessels for something larger, something sacred. The energy in the air is thick, almost electric, as if the veil between the living and the dead is growing thin, allowing the two worlds to touch, to intertwine. The dancers' feet do not tire, their bodies do not falter. They dance for those who cannot, for those who are lost in the beyond, for those who still walk among the living. The drumming grows louder, the call for the spirits becoming urgent. In the movement of their bodies, they seek communion with the departed, seeking answers, seeking comfort, seeking peace. In these ceremonies, the sun dance, the ghost dance, and the many others that exist across the land, there is a deep, unshakable bond between the living and the dead, between the earth and the heavens. The rituals are not just for the community, but for the world itself, for the balance between all things. They are acts of remembrance and hope, of sacrifice and devotion. They are the pulse of the people, the heartbeat of their beliefs, the breath of the earth that sustains them. Each movement, each prayer, each beat of the drum is a call to the spirits, a plea for their guidance, their protection, their strength. The dancers are not just dancing for themselves, they are dancing for the entire world, for the future, for the past, for the spirit that flows through everything. In these ceremonies, there is no separation. The earth, the sky, the spirits, the people, they are all one. The ceremonies are a reminder that we are all connected, that the past, present, and future are woven together in a sacred dance of life. When the dancers step into the circle, they step into a space where time is not linear, where the spirits walk beside them, guiding them with each step, with each movement, with each breath. There is no fear here, only faith. The flames of the fire flicker, casting shadows on the dancers as the night stretches on. The energy is palpable, thick with the presence of the spirits, the ancestors, the earth. The ritual continues, through the night, through the hours, through the generations. And in the movement of their bodies, in the beat of the drum, the people are reminded that they are never alone. The spirits are always with them, always guiding, always watching, always dancing with them. As the ceremony comes to an end, the dancers are not the same. They are marked by the spirits, touched by the divine. They carry with them the energy of the dance, the power of the ritual, and the knowledge that they are part of something much larger than themselves. The spirits have answered the call, and the people, through their ceremonies and dances, have given thanks for their presence, for their guidance, and for the strength to carry on. The air is thick with anticipation. A single step into the sacred space, and everything feels different. A heavy silence hangs in the air, like 1,000 unseen eyes watching, waiting. In the center, a towering totem pole rises. Its rough-hewn surface, carved with intricate figures of animals, spirits, and ancestors, tells a story that belongs not just to the one who carved it, but to everyone who has ever stood in its presence. Each line, each detail is not just art, it is a connection to the spirit world, a bridge between the living and the dead, between the earth and the heavens. A mask sits quietly in the corner, its painted eyes staring back with an intensity that almost feels alive. The carved wooden face of the mask is bold, fierce, its features exaggerated. To the unknowing, it may seem like a mere object, but to those who understand, it holds power. The mask is not just a representation of a spirit, it is a vessel. It carries the essence of the spirit it embodies, and when worn by its rightful guardian, it allows the wearer to step into a new realm, a world where the boundaries between the living and the spirits blur. The sacred objects, whether totem poles, masks, or other artifacts, are more than just physical items. They are living things, bound by ritual, ceremony, and belief. They hold the memories of those who created them, and through the act of reverence, they continue to carry the stories of the past, the wisdom of the ancestors, and the presence of the spirits. They are channels through which the unseen world makes itself known, reaching out across the veil to touch those who dare to listen, to feel. In the presence of these sacred objects, time seems to slow, as if the air itself is holding its breath. You can feel the weight of history pressing in, the power of the spirits surrounding you, their whispers almost audible in the stillness. It is as though the totem pole is not just a statue but a guardian, an ancient protector that watches over the land, its eyes carved in wood, but its soul ever watchful. The figures on the pole are not just representations of animals and ancestors, they are embodiments of the forces that shape the world, the wisdom of the wolf, the strength of the bear, the grace of the eagle. And when you stand before them, you feel their power, their presence, as though they are alive. The mask, too, is more than a mask. It is a key to another world. When worn, it transforms the wearer. The spirit of the animal or ancestor it represents enters the body of the one who wears it. It is said that the wearer becomes one with the spirit, moving with its grace, seeing through its eyes, hearing with its ears. In this sacred transformation, the person is not merely a human, but something more. The mask binds the wearer to the spirit world, to the ancestors, to the forces of nature that guide all living things. The dancer, the shaman, the healer, whoever wears the mask becomes the embodiment of the spirit, carrying its message, its power, into the world of the living. And then there are the objects that don't need to be worn, but are still sacred in their own right. These are the tools of the spirit, the items that hold power because they have been imbued with purpose and intent. A ceremonial knife, a rattle made from bones, a pouch of sacred herbs, all of these objects are connected to the spirit world. They are used in rituals to honor the spirits, to bring healing, to seek guidance. Each object carries within it a piece of the spirit it represents. To hold these objects is to hold the power of the spirits themselves. It is a humbling experience, one that connects the holder to something greater than themselves. There is a moment during the ceremony, a quiet, sacred moment, when the spirits are invoked. The totem poles, the masks, the sacred objects, all of them seem to come alive in that moment. The drum beats slow, the chanting begins, and the air is thick with anticipation. The spirits have been called, and they are here, present in the objects that surround the people. The mask is held up to the light, its painted features glowing in the flickering fire. The totem pole stands tall, its figures seeming to shift in the firelight, as if they are breathing, alive in their own way. The sacred objects are not just physical things, they are vessels of power, holding the essence of the spirits, the wisdom of the past, the hopes of the future. When the ceremony ends, when the last drumbeat fades into the night, the objects return to their resting places. The totem poles stand silently in the forest, watching over the land. The masks are carefully stored, awaiting their next call to service. The sacred tools are returned to their hiding places, where they will rest until needed again. But even when the objects are not in use, they are not empty. They hold the spirits, the power, the wisdom, waiting for the right moment, the right person, to call upon them again. There is a deep respect for these objects. They are not just things to be admired, they are sacred, living forces that are bound to the spirit world. To touch them is to invite the presence of the spirits into your life. To wear them is to carry their power, their essence. These sacred objects are the ties that bind the human world to the spirit world. They are the reminders that we are not alone, that the spirits are always with us, watching, guiding, protecting. As the sun sets and the shadows lengthen, the totem poles stand tall, the masks rest quietly, and the sacred objects return to their places of rest. But their power is not gone. It lingers, quietly, in the air, in the land, in the hearts of those who understand. These objects are more than just relics of the past. They are the living connection between the human and the divine, between the earth and the sky. They are the vessels through which the spirits speak, through which the ancestors continue to guide, through which the earth continues to offer its wisdom. There's a moment, a quiet moment, when the world seems to stop. A deep silence falls over a room, a gathering, a place of reverence. It is the moment when a story is told not just with words, but with the very spirit of the storyteller. In that silence, something ancient and powerful stirs, as though the spirits, long thought to be in the past, have stepped forward once again. They are still here. They are always here. In the middle of a busy, fast-paced world, where technology hums constantly in the background and the demands of everyday life never seem to slow, there is a place where the connection to the spiritual world is as strong as it ever was. It's not hidden away in some far-off time or place, but right here, right now. For Native American communities, living with spirits isn't a thing of the past, it's a part of life today. The spirits are not merely legends or myths, they are active participants in the lives of those who honor them, who listen to their whispers in the winds and see their faces in the dance of the firelight. Imagine a grandmother's hands, weathered with age, holding an eagle feather. She speaks softly to her grandchildren, telling them the stories of the ancestors, the spirit beings that continue to walk beside them. Her voice is steady and calm, as though the spirits themselves are whispering through her. The children, wide-eyed, hang on every word. They know that what she's saying is more than a story. It's the truth. The eagle, the bear, the wolf, they are not distant memories or just symbols. They are living, breathing guides, still present in the world today. It's in the ceremonies, too, where the spirits make their presence known. The sun dance, a sacred and demanding ritual, continues to be practiced in certain communities. Those who participate, who fast and dance for days, are not just honoring their ancestors, they are reaching out to the spirits, asking for guidance, for strength, for wisdom. They can feel it in the air, that crackling energy that fills the space, that moment when a person's soul touches something greater than themselves. And the spirits answer, not as distant echoes from the past, but as living, breathing beings that surround them, hold them, and give them what they need to continue their lives. In modern Native American communities, the spirits are not just confined to the past, they are woven into the fabric of daily life. It's not unusual to see a person carrying a small token, a feather, a stone, a piece of jewelry, something that connects them to their spirit guides. These objects aren't just things, they are reminders, little pieces of the spirit world that are carried with them throughout the day. They offer strength in moments of doubt, comfort in times of pain. The spirits, once thought to be far away, walk beside them, just as real and present as the person next to them. The world may have changed, but the need for guidance, for connection to something greater, hasn't. Whether it's in a quiet prayer before a decision, a dream that carries a message, or a chance encounter with a symbol that feels too perfect to be random, the spirits are there. They are ever present, living in the very land, sky, and hearts of the people. They are in the trees, the rivers, the winds, and the animals. Every element of nature holds the spirit of something, something that speaks to those who know how to listen. In moments of crisis, it is the spirits that many turn to, asking for help when there seems to be no way forward. It's not a distant prayer to a deity in the clouds, it's a real and tangible plea to the forces that shape their world. A mother, worried for her child's health, whispers a prayer to the spirits of healing. A father, facing a difficult decision, asks for guidance from the spirit of the buffalo, seeking strength and endurance. In those quiet, desperate moments, the spirits don't stand apart. They step forward, surrounding the person with the calm assurance that they are not alone, that the connection between the physical and the spiritual is as strong as ever. There are also the dreams, the vivid, sometimes intense dreams that visit when one's spirit is in need of guidance. For those who are open to the messages, these dreams can be powerful. A dream of an eagle flying across the sky might signify the need to look at things from a higher perspective, to see beyond the immediate challenges and find the deeper truths. A vision of a bear might indicate a need for introspection, for finding one's inner strength. The messages of the spirits come through not just in visions, but in everyday life, in the rhythm of the seasons, the rise and fall of the sun, the migration of animals, the shifting of the wind. The spirits are not out of reach, locked in a time long ago. They are alive in the present, waiting for those who are willing to connect. Even in the hustle and bustle of a modern city, the spirits are felt. There is a quiet moment in the heart of the city when a person stands alone at the edge of a park, watching the flight of birds overhead. That moment is sacred. It's the same moment that the ancestors felt when they watched the birds fly, when they looked up to the sky and found the eagle's strength, the raven's wisdom. Today, the spirits are still there. They are present in the city's quiet spaces, in the wind that whispers through the trees, and the stillness that can be felt when one stops long enough to listen. It's not just about the big ceremonies or rituals. The spirit world lives in the everyday moments. A child playing in the yard, laughing as they run with a feather in their hand, is connected to the same spirits that guided their ancestors. An elder, sitting quietly by the fire, telling stories of the past, is not just sharing history, they are bringing the spirits of the ancestors into the present, making them a part of the world today. The spirits, in all their forms, continue to guide, protect, and bless. They are not something to be worshipped from a distance, but something to be lived with, to be honored and listened to. For those who are open to it, the connection to the spirit world is alive and vibrant, a thread that runs through every part of life. The spirits are not just a part of history, they are a part of today. They are with us, guiding us every step of the way.